1. The Ship of Theseus. Imagine a ship, old and weathered, slowly having its wooden planks replaced, one by one, over time. Eventually, every single part is new. Now the question arises, is it still the same ship? Now go one step further. Imagine all the original planks were saved and eventually reassembled into another ship. Which one, if any, is the real Ship of Theseus? This ancient thought experiment challenges our idea of identity over time. If something's parts change gradually, but its structure and function remain, is its identity preserved? Or does true identity lie in the material itself? Now apply this to you. Your body replaces its cells constantly. Your thoughts, memories, even values evolve. Are you the same person you were 10 years ago? The Ship of Theseus forces us to confront a disturbing idea. Identity may not be fixed. It may not lie in substance or memory, but in something more abstract, perhaps a pattern, a story, or an illusion. And if identity is this unstable, what does it even mean to be you? 2. Bundle Theory, David Hume. David Hume proposed something radical. When we look inside ourselves, through reflection or introspection, we never actually find a self. We find only a stream of thoughts, sensations, emotions, and experiences. In his view, the self is not a core essence, not a soul, not a fixed being. It's just a bundle of perceptions, like a cloud made of ever-changing particles. There's no glue holding them together. No permanent self at the center. Think about it. When you're angry, you're aware of anger. When you're sad, you're aware of sadness. But where is the you beyond these feelings? To Hume, the idea of a permanent self is just a fiction, a habit of language and thought. We say I or me, but there is no stable I behind the scenes. This can feel unsettling. If we are just a bundle, then there's no one really driving the ship. No captain, just the waves. And yet, life continues. The bundle flows. The illusion of continuity gives rise to everything we call me. So the haunting question becomes, what are you, really, when the idea of you disappears? 3. Derek Parfit's Fission Thought Experiment. Imagine this. Someday in the future, technology allows your brain to be scanned and copied perfectly. Now two bodies wake up, each with your memories, personality, and preferences. They both believe they are you. Which one is the real you? This is Derek Parfit's famous fission thought experiment. It reveals a deep problem with personal identity. If both copies feel identical to you, and both continue your life, then identity doesn't seem to be about a single continuous person. Parfit argued that what matters isn't identity, but psychological continuity. Memory, character, intentions, if those persist, it doesn't matter whether it's one person or two. Identity becomes irrelevant. This deeply challenges how we think about death, survival, and the soul. If there's no single self to preserve, then survival is just about information being carried on, not a soul passing through time. Parfit believed this idea could bring freedom from fear of death. If the self is a story, and stories can be continued, even in others, then death may lose its grip. But at the same time, it's disturbing. If you can be split into two, then maybe you never truly existed at all. 4. No self, Buddhism. In Buddhist philosophy, one of the most profound and unsettling teachings is this: there is no permanent, unchanging self. What we call I or me is a mental construction, a label we place on a constantly shifting flow of experiences. You are not your thoughts. You are not your body. You are not even your memories. Each of these is changing, moment by moment. Just as a river flows and changes with every second, Your mind and body are in constant motion. There is no static self that remains the same from one breath to the next. The illusion of self, called atta in Pali, is seen as the root of suffering. We cling to our identity. We defend it, fear its loss, and chase pleasure to reinforce it. But this clinging leads to dissatisfaction, because nothing about the self is stable. When a person deeply realizes there is no self, only sensations, thoughts, and awareness arising and fading, they become free. Free from fear, free from ego, free from the illusion of control. It's liberating and terrifying. Because if there's no you, then who suffers? Who chooses? Who even lives? Maybe, in truth, there is only experience, and nothing else. 5. Brain in a vat. Imagine this. You're not sitting in a room. You're not reading on a screen. You're actually a brain, floating in a vat of nutrients, connected to a computer. This computer sends electrical signals that perfectly simulate everything you feel, see, touch, and hear. Everything around you, your body, your memories, even your sense of self, is nothing more than a programmed illusion. This is the famous brain in a vat scenario. It asks, how do you know your reality is real? What if your entire life has been manufactured by some external intelligence? What's disturbing isn't just the possibility of being tricked. It's that you can't prove otherwise. All of your evidence for reality comes from your senses. And if your senses are being manipulated, then evidence itself becomes meaningless. This challenges the foundation of knowledge. If we can't trust our perceptions, can we trust anything? The idea echoes Descartes' radical doubt, but goes further, suggesting that the physical world may be a complete fiction. And the hardest part? Even if it were true, you'd have no way to know. No way to escape. No way to be sure if the world outside your mind even exists at all. 6. Split brain experiments. In the 20th century, doctors began performing a radical surgery for patients with severe epilepsy. They cut the corpus callosum, the bundle of nerves connecting the brain's two hemispheres. What followed stunned the world of neuroscience and philosophy. Patients seemed normal at first. They could walk, talk, think, and function. But when scientists began testing them in controlled settings, strange things happened. The two halves of the brain, now unable to communicate, began to behave like two separate minds. Show an image to the left visual field, processed by the right hemisphere, and the patient couldn't describe it, but could draw it. Show a word to the right field, processed by the left hemisphere, and the patient could say it, but not draw it. In some cases, the two hands of the same person would fight, one buttoning a shirt, the other unbuttoning it. One hand choosing one food, the other rejecting it. It raised a haunting question. If your brain splits into two, and each half acts independently, where is you? Which side is truly you? The split brain research suggests that consciousness may not be unified. That what we call a self might just be a temporary agreement between multiple processes in the brain. 7. Eternal recurrence. Picture this. A demon whispers in your ear, asking, what if every choice you make, every joy and every sorrow, every moment in your life, must be repeated forever? Not just once, but again and again, in exactly the same way, with no change, no escape, no relief. This is Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence. It's not just a physical theory, it's a psychological test. It asks, If you had to live your life over and over for eternity, would you rejoice? Or despair? Most people might recoil at the idea. Every regret, every pain, every mistake, all looping eternally. But Nietzsche challenges us. What if we lived in such a way that we would want that repetition? That we could say yes to life, completely? It's a disturbing thought, because it removes the hope of second chances. There's no next life, no final reward. Only this moment, endlessly repeating. But there's also power in it. If this life is all there is, forever, then every moment matters. Every act becomes sacred. The question lingers, are you living in a way you'd be willing to live again and again, for all eternity? 8. Panpsychism. Imagine if consciousness isn't rare. Imagine it isn't something that only emerges in complex brains, but something that exists everywhere. In everything. That's the strange and deeply unsettling idea behind panpsychism. According to this view, consciousness is a fundamental property of reality, like mass or charge. Atoms may not be conscious like humans, but they may contain primitive forms of experience. A sliver of awareness. A glimmer of subjectivity. This doesn't mean that rocks think, but it might mean they feel in a way beyond our understanding. Even electrons may possess some inner reality, however faint. This view has ancient roots in both Eastern and Western philosophy, but modern versions attempt to solve the hard problem of consciousness. That is, how does experience arise from matter? If everything has some level of consciousness, then there's no sharp line where mind begins. Instead, there's a vast, interconnected spectrum of experience, flowing through all things. It's a beautiful idea, but also a disturbing one, because it blurs the boundary between subject and object. It means you are not alone in being aware, and that the universe may be far more alive, more awake than you ever imagined. 9. Solipsism. Try to prove this, that anyone or anything outside your own mind truly exists. Can you? Every face you see, every voice you hear, every touch you feel, it's all processed by your brain. You never experience the outside world directly. You experience only your own perceptions. This leads to solipsism, the eerie belief that only your own mind is certain to exist. Everything else, every person, every object, even the world itself, could be a dream, a projection, or a trick of consciousness. You could be in a simulation. You could be dreaming. You could be utterly alone, forever. It's a lonely, terrifying thought, because it cuts off the possibility of genuine connection. Love, friendship, history, all could be illusions. Characters in a vast internal story. Most people reject solipsism not because they can disprove it, but because it's emotionally unbearable. We live as if others are real. And maybe that's all we can do. But the philosophical question remains. If your entire world is just your mind, then what happens when you end? And what does it mean if all this entire reality, is just you? 10. Zeno's paradoxes. Take a single step. Simple, right? But Zeno of Elia would argue, you can never truly reach your destination. Why? Because before reaching it, you must reach halfway. And before that, half of that. And before that, another half. Infinite halves. So how can you ever arrive? This is Zeno's famous paradox of motion. It seems to show that movement is impossible because it involves completing an infinite number of steps. He offered other paradoxes, too, like Achilles racing a tortoise. If the tortoise has a head start, Achilles must first reach where the tortoise was. But in that time, the tortoise moves forward again. And again. He never catches up. It sounds absurd, because in real life, of course Achilles wins. Of course we move. But Zeno's logic is airtight, based on math, time, and space. These paradoxes reveal deep flaws in how we think about infinity, continuity, and motion. They forced mathematicians and philosophers to rethink the nature of time and space itself. The disturbing part? Even now, with calculus and quantum theory, motion isn't as simple as it seems. Zeno's paradoxes whisper that the reality we move through might be built on contradictions we still don't fully understand. 11. The hard problem of consciousness. Imagine you're looking at a beautiful sunset, orange clouds stretched across a purple sky. Now pause. Not to describe the colors or the physics, but to feel the experience. That inner feeling, the warm awe, the vivid color, the sense of presence, that is consciousness. And here's the mystery. Why does it feel like anything at all to be you? This is the hard problem of consciousness, a phrase coined by philosopher David Chalmers. He drew a distinction between the easy problems of consciousness and the hard one. The easy problems involve mechanism, how the brain processes input, how it controls speech, or how it responds to pain. They're called easy not because they are simple, but because they seem solvable through science. The hard problem is different. It's not about what the brain does, it's about why it feels like something. Why doesn't your brain just operate like a computer, processing data, producing behavior, and doing tasks, all in silence? Some call this the explanatory gap. We can explain the function. We can describe the wiring. But we still can't explain why those functions are accompanied by subjective experience, what it's like to be conscious. Imagine a robot designed to smile when it sees a puppy. It has senses, logic, memory. It smiles, speaks, reacts, but does it feel anything? Probably not. Now, imagine your brain. Similar in some ways, electrical signals, reactions, memory. But for some reason, you experience a feeling, the joy of seeing the puppy. Why? What turns biological matter into mind? Some philosophers propose radical ideas. Panpsychists argue that consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, like space or time. Others think it might be an emergent illusion, like a rainbow caused by the interaction of sunlight and water. But we don't really know. And that's the point. The hard problem confronts us with a strange possibility. We are conscious beings in a world where consciousness itself remains unexplainable. And until we understand it, we don't truly understand ourselves. 12. Qualia inaccessibility. Think of your favorite song. Now try to explain what it feels like to hear it, not just its lyrics or melody, but the way it stirs something in your chest. That indescribable quality, the texture of the experience, is called a quale, plural, qualia. Qualia are the raw, subjective elements of consciousness. The redness of red, the saltiness of salt, the ache of longing. And here's the disturbing truth: no one else can ever directly access your qualia. You could write pages trying to describe how chocolate tastes to you. You could use metaphors, comparisons, even brain scans, but all of it would fall short. Because your experience is yours alone. This is the core of qualia inaccessibility. Every human being lives in a private world of sensation. We speak the same language. We share similar biology. But we can't share experience. You don't even know if others see the same colors as you. Your blue might be their green, but because the names are shared, you'll never know. This becomes even more disturbing in the context of empathy. We comfort each other. We try to understand each other. But there's a wall we cannot cross, the inner world of another person's mind. Philosopher Thomas Nagel described this in his famous essay, "What is it like to be a bat?" Even if we knew everything about a bat's behavior, sonar, and brain structure, we still wouldn't know what it's like to be a bat. Not from the inside. And that's true for other humans, too. Qualia inaccessibility raises troubling questions. Are we ever truly understood? Can two minds really connect? Or are we forever isolated, experiencing life side by side, but never truly together? And if your inner world is entirely sealed off, how alone are you, really? 13. Mary's room. Mary is a scientist. A brilliant one. She lives in a perfectly black and white room. She's never seen color, not red, not blue, not green. Yet she studies color obsessively. She learns all the physical facts, how light works, how the retina responds, how the brain processes visual input. She knows exactly what happens when someone sees red. Then, one day, she steps out of the room. She sees red for the very first time. And in that moment, something happens that all her years of study could not prepare her for. She feels it. She experiences it. And she realizes she's learned something new. This thought experiment, proposed by philosopher Frank Jackson, reveals a profound philosophical challenge. Not all knowledge is factual or scientific. Mary knew every fact about color, but she didn't know what red felt like. That feeling, that first-hand experience, is something that no data can provide. The point is that experience itself contains a kind of knowledge. A kind that cannot be translated into formulas, words, or measurements. This challenges the idea that science can explain everything. If physical facts were all there is, then Mary should have known everything about red. But she didn't, because consciousness is more than facts. Some philosophers say this proves the mind cannot be fully explained by physical science alone. Others argue Mary didn't gain new knowledge, just a new way to access it. Either way, the idea haunts us. It means that no matter how much we learn about brains, biology, and chemistry, we might never understand what it feels like to be someone else. Mary's room reminds us that the deepest truths may not be out there in equations, but in here, inside the quiet, private realm of consciousness. 14. Philosophical zombies. Imagine someone who looks just like you. They walk, talk, laugh, cry. They react to pain. They say things like, "I feel so happy today," or "that really hurt." From the outside, they are completely human. But inside, there's nothing. No awareness. No experience. No consciousness. This is the idea of a philosophical zombie, often just called a P-zombie. It's not a monster. It's a perfect physical duplicate of a human being, down to the last cell and neuron, but entirely lacking consciousness. There's no inner light. No sentience. Just behavior. The concept was popularized by philosopher David Chalmers, and it's used to explore a profound question: is consciousness something extra? Or can everything about the mind be explained purely in physical, functional terms? If a zombie could behave exactly like a person without being conscious, then clearly, behavior and consciousness aren't the same. And that's unsettling, because it means we could never tell if someone else is conscious. We assume they are, but what if they are not? Worse yet, how do you know you're not the zombie? The thought experiment challenges materialism, the belief that everything, including consciousness, can be reduced to physical processes. If a zombie is physically identical but lacks inner experience, then consciousness must be something non-physical or at least non-reducible. It also forces us to face a deeply isolating truth: consciousness is private. We can observe behavior. We can read brainwaves. But we'll never see someone's experience. It's invisible, yet it defines reality. So the P-zombie isn't just a creepy sci-fi idea. It's a mirror. A reminder that even in a world full of minds, you may be fundamentally alone in knowing who's truly conscious. And perhaps, more disturbingly, you may never be able to prove that you are either. 15. Chinese room, John Searle. Imagine you're locked in a room. Outside the room, a native Chinese speaker slides pieces of paper under the door. Each paper contains a question, written entirely in Chinese. You don't understand Chinese at all. But inside the room, you have a giant rulebook. For every Chinese symbol you receive, you find a matching one to send back. To the person outside, your responses are perfect. They think you're fluent. But really, you have no understanding. You're just following rules, manipulating symbols without knowing what they mean. This is the heart of John Searle's Chinese room argument. It's a powerful critique of strong AI, the idea that a computer can actually understand language or possess a mind simply by processing information. Searle's point is that syntax isn't semantics. Just because a system can manipulate symbols, like words or numbers, doesn't mean it understands them. A computer might pass a Turing test. It might have flawless conversation. But inside, there's no awareness. No meaning. No mind. This challenges the dream that artificial intelligence could one day be conscious. Maybe it can simulate consciousness, but not possess it. Searle draws a sharp line between simulation and understanding. A computer simulating intelligence is like a furnace simulating digestion. It may produce a similar output, but the inner process is fundamentally different. The Chinese room forces us to ask, what does it mean to understand something? Is it just input and output? Or is understanding tied to conscious experience, to context, to self-awareness? And if machines can only manipulate symbols, then no matter how smart they seem, they might always be empty inside. 16. Anatta, no soul. In many traditions, the soul is sacred. It's seen as the core of your being, the permanent, unchanging essence that defines who you are. But in Buddhist philosophy, this very idea is challenged and ultimately rejected. The concept of anatta, or no self, teaches that there is no permanent, unchanging soul within you. There is no fixed essence behind your thoughts, your memories, or your personality. Instead, what you call the self is a constantly shifting process. Like a flame, it changes moment to moment, yet appears continuous. Your body changes. Your emotions rise and fall. Your beliefs evolve. There is no thread that remains untouched. We cling to a sense of self because it feels stable. It gives us identity, security, and purpose. But Buddhism teaches that this illusion is the root of suffering. Because we try to protect a self that doesn't really exist. We're afraid of death because we think something essential will be lost. But if there is no fixed self, then there's nothing to lose. Realizing anatta isn't just intellectual. It's experimental. Through deep meditation and mindfulness, practitioners observe the mind in motion. They begin to see that what they thought was me is just a bundle of sensations, desires, and thoughts, arising and fading over and over. At first, this can feel terrifying. If there's no self, then who am I? Who's thinking these thoughts? Who's making choices? But over time, the realization becomes liberating. If there's no self, there's no ego to protect, no pride to defend, no fixed identity to cling to. Just awareness, fluid, open, and free. Anatta invites you to let go, to stop grasping at I and mine. And in that release, to find a deeper peace, a freedom beyond the boundaries of self. 17. Simulation hypothesis. What if nothing around you is real? The floor beneath you, the sky above, the people you love, even your own body. That's the disturbing possibility raised by the simulation hypothesis, the idea that our entire universe may be an extremely sophisticated computer simulation. It sounds like science fiction, but serious philosophers and physicists are asking the question and taking it seriously. One of the most well-known arguments comes from philosopher Nick Bostrom. He suggests that if any civilization becomes technologically advanced enough, it could simulate entire universes, down to the last atom, with sentient beings inside who don't know they are simulated. Now imagine this. There could be billions, maybe trillions, of simulated realities, and only one base-level universe. If that's true, then statistically, we're probably in a simulation. And the eerie part is, we'd never know. Just like characters in a video game can't sense the player, we can't perceive what lies outside. All our evidence is part of the code, even our doubts. This leads to deep questions. What is real? What is consciousness? Is there a creator? If we're simulated, then someone or something built us. That might sound like theology, but with computer code. The simulation hypothesis destabilizes everything. Morality, free will, reality itself. And until we can prove otherwise, we may never know if we're truly alive, or just lines of code dreaming in the dark. 18. False memories. Your memories define you. They form your identity. Your childhood, your experiences, your relationships, these are the pieces that make up yourself. But what if many of them aren't real? False memories are not just rare glitches. They are shockingly common. Our minds are not perfect recorders, they're more like story editors. Each time you remember something, your brain reconstructs it, like reassembling a puzzle. And sometimes, it adds the wrong piece. In psychological experiments, researchers have implanted entirely fictional memories into people's minds. Memories of being lost in a mall. Of meeting Bugs Bunny at Disneyland. Impossible, since Bugs isn't a Disney character. And yet, people vividly remember it. Feelings, details, emotion. As if it truly happened. Why does this matter? Because it means your past is malleable. Your identity, the story you tell yourself about who you are, could be built on a shaky foundation. It gets darker. Trauma, abuse, love, forgiveness, all shaped by memory. But if those memories are distorted, exaggerated, or fabricated, then who are you really? This problem touches on law, therapy, relationships, and most of all, philosophy. If memory is unreliable, then the self is unstable. You may not be who you think you are. In fact, you may never have been. 19. Causal determinism. You make choices every day. What to eat, what to say, who to love. You feel free. But what if all those decisions were already determined? Causal determinism is the idea that every action, thought, and choice is the inevitable result of prior causes, stretching back endlessly. Your genetics, your environment, your childhood, your brain chemistry, all of it leads to this moment. Think about a line of dominoes. Once the first one falls, the rest follow. That's you. A chain of causes and effects, one after the other. In this view, free will is an illusion. You feel like you're choosing, but your brain, wired by forces outside your control, made the choice before you even noticed. Modern neuroscience backs this up. Experiments have shown that the brain begins making decisions milliseconds before people become consciously aware of them. That's chilling. It means you might just be watching, like a narrator, not a driver. This challenges justice, morality, and personal responsibility. How can you blame someone for a crime if they were just playing out causes beyond their control? How can you praise anyone for greatness if their success was already written? Causal determinism doesn't make life meaningless, but it forces us to rethink what freedom really means, if it ever existed at all. 20. Neural implants, transhumanism. What makes you, you? Is it your memories? Your emotions? Your unique way of thinking? Now imagine this. In the near future, technology allows us to enhance the brain. Neural implants that boost memory. Chips that increase focus. Artificial synapses that merge your mind with the internet. At first, it sounds amazing. No more brain fog. Instant learning. Even emotional regulation. This is the promise of transhumanism, the belief that humans can and should transcend biology through technology. But here's the disturbing question. If we change the brain, do we risk changing the self? Your personality is shaped by your neural patterns. If you alter those patterns, through implants, drugs, or digital augmentation, you may become someone else. Gradually, invisibly. Suppose a chip removes your depression. Wonderful. But what if it also removes your sensitivity, your introspection, your art? Or imagine replacing parts of your brain one by one with synthetic components. At what point do you disappear? When does the self dissolve into a machine? This raises ancient questions in a new form. What is identity? Is the self tied to the brain's biology? Or can it be digitized, copied, transferred? Transhumanism offers incredible possibilities. But behind it lurks an existential risk. To gain power over the mind, we may have to let go of the person who once lived inside it. 21. Death is non-experience, Epicurus. We fear death. Not just pain or dying, but the great unknown of what comes after. Will there be judgment? Rebirth? Emptiness? The philosopher Epicurus offered a stark, unsettling response. There's nothing to fear. Not because there's an afterlife, but because there's nothing at all. His argument is chilling in its simplicity. He said, death is nothing to us. When we exist, death is not. And when death is, we are not. In other words, you'll never experience death. You may experience dying, but never being dead. Why? Because experience requires consciousness, and when you're dead, consciousness no longer exists. There is no awareness, no pain, no thought, no you. It's not like sleeping. It's not like floating in darkness. It's the absence of experience itself. The same nothingness you had before you were born. And here's the disturbing part, that means your entire being is temporary. A flicker, a brief window of awareness, and then gone. For some, this is comforting. There's no eternal punishment. No endless void to float through. Just nothing. Pure non-existence. But for others, it's terrifying. Because it means the world will go on without you. Your memories will fade. Your story will end, and you'll never know it. Epicurus thought we waste too much life fearing the moment that ends it. And yet, that fear seems hardwired into us. His message is bold, death is nothing. But it forces us to ask, if death is truly the end of all experience, then what should we do with the tiny, fragile span we've been given? 22. The Absurd, Albert Camus. You wake up, drink coffee, go to work, come home, sleep, and repeat. Days blur. Weeks vanish. And at some point, a thought hits you like a silent thunderclap. What's the point of all this? That question lies at the heart of Albert Camus' philosophy of the absurd. He believed there is a fundamental contradiction in the human condition. On one hand, we crave meaning. We seek order, justice, purpose. We want life to matter. But on the other hand, the universe is silent. It doesn't offer answers. It doesn't care. It just is. This conflict, between our desire for meaning and the universe's indifference, creates the absurd. Camus argued that this realization can be unbearable. Some choose religion, trying to inject meaning into chaos. Others may turn to suicide, refusing to live in a meaningless world. But Camus proposed a third path, rebellion. Not rebellion in anger, but in defiance. To stare into the void and still say, I will live. To create art, love, and laughter in spite of the absurd. Not because life has meaning, but because we choose to give it meaning moment by moment. In this view, life becomes a kind of beautiful protest. Not in search of answers, but in the joy of living without them. The absurd doesn't ask us to despair. It dares us to live, boldly, joyfully, absurdly, in a world that owes us nothing. 23. Memento mori. You are going to die. Not someday. Not in theory. But really. Your heart will stop. Your breath will leave. The world will keep spinning, and you will no longer be part of it. This is the quiet whisper behind the ancient phrase memento mori, Latin for remember you must die. Far from morbid, it was meant to be transformative. In ancient Rome, victorious generals would ride through cheering crowds, and behind them, a servant would quietly say, memento mori. A reminder, glory fades. Life is brief. Death comes for all. Philosophers like the Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, embraced this reminder. Not to frighten themselves, but to live more clearly. To waste less time. To focus on what matters. To live with urgency, humility, and purpose. Because when death is close in your awareness, trivial things begin to disappear. You argue less. You love deeper. You speak honestly. You let go of petty worries. Each moment becomes precious, not because it lasts, but because it doesn't. In modern life, we push death out of view. We hide it, sanitize it, distract ourselves from it. But memento mori invites you to bring it closer, not with fear, but with clarity. You are temporary. You are finite. And that truth, far from dark, can be a guiding light. So remember, you will die. And then ask, how should you live? 24. Heidegger's being toward death. Most people think of death as an event, something that happens at the end. A moment, a stopping point, a final breath. But the philosopher Martin Heidegger saw it differently. For him, death isn't a moment you encounter someday. It's a fundamental part of your existence, right now. You are not simply living and then one day you die. You are, in every moment, being toward death. What does that mean? Heidegger believed that death is not just a possibility, but your most personal, certain possibility. No one else can die your death for you. You can delay it, ignore it, distract yourself, but it's always there. Looming. Inevitable. Part of your structure as a human being. In his view, most people live in inauthenticity. They avoid thinking about death. They busy themselves with routines, expectations, and shallow comforts. But this avoidance keeps them from truly living. From making real choices. To live authentically, Heidegger says, is to confront your death. Not with despair, but with clear eyes. To live with the knowledge that your time is limited, that every decision carries weight because you will not be here forever. It's unsettling. Because it means your life is not just heading toward death, it's shaped by it. Your very being is defined by its end. You are dying. Right now. Slowly, steadily. Not later, but now. And that knowledge, terrifying as it is, can also wake you up. Force you to ask, am I living a life that's truly mine? Or am I just passing time until I vanish? Being toward death is not about morbidity. It's about urgency. It's a call to live deeply, because every moment is already slipping away. 25. Derek Parfit on death. What happens when you die? For most of us, the answer is binary. Either you survive or you don't. Either your soul continues or your story ends. But philosopher Derek Parfit proposed something radical and disturbingly unfamiliar. He argued that personal identity is not what we think it is. We imagine the self as a solid, continuous entity, a you that persists over time. But Parfit believed this is an illusion. Instead of a fixed self, he saw a bundle of psychological connections, memories, personality traits, intentions, consciousness. And these things, he argued, can survive in degrees. Imagine you're teleported, Star Trek style. Your body is disassembled and reconstructed elsewhere. Is that still you? What if the machine creates two identical copies? Which one is you? Parfit's unsettling answer, identity doesn't matter. What matters is continuity. If your memories and psychology continue, even partially, then something of you survives. But not you, exactly. He applied this to death. Instead of asking, will I survive? Parfit asks, how much of me will continue? In that light, death becomes less of a cliff and more of a fade-out. A slow unthreading of the self. And here's the most disturbing part. Once you let go of identity as fixed, the fear of death dissolves, but so does the comforting illusion of being one permanent self. You're not a single, solid person. You're a pattern. A process. One that flickers, changes, fades, and eventually ends. Parfit frees us from fearing the end of the self. But he also leaves us with a haunting realization, maybe there was no self to end in the first place. 26. Pascal's wager. Imagine you're placing a bet, but the stakes are infinite. Eternity. Heaven. Hell. This is Pascal's wager, one of the most famous and unsettling arguments in the history of philosophy. The 17th century philosopher Blaise Pascal wasn't trying to prove God exists. Instead, he argued that believing in God is the safer bet. Here's how it goes. If you believe in God, and you're wrong, you lose nothing. Maybe some time, some pleasures. But if you're right, you gain eternal paradise. On the other hand, if you don't believe in God, and you're wrong, you risk eternal damnation. Infinite suffering. Unending regret. So even if the chance is small, wouldn't it be wise to believe? On the surface, it seems like a clever, even practical argument. But beneath it lies a dark implication, that the universe may be a cosmic trap. That simply choosing the wrong belief might condemn you forever. It turns faith into a gamble, a psychological insurance policy. Not based on truth, but on fear. And if multiple religions claim truth, each with different rules, different gods, different hells, then which one do you bet on? Pascal's wager doesn't offer clarity. It offers risk management in the face of eternal horror. And perhaps the most disturbing thought of all is this. What if the universe really is like that? What if eternity hinges not on how you live or what kind of person you are, but on what you believed or didn't? 27. Last Man Thought Experiment. Imagine this. The entire human race is gone. Extinct. Every city abandoned. Every culture vanished. Every story ended. Except you remain. You are the last living human being. No one else is coming. No future generations. No one to hear your voice. No one to remember what humanity once was. This is the last man thought experiment, a philosophical tool used to ask a disturbing question. If no one is left to care, does anything still matter? You can preserve art. You can write down your thoughts. You can tend to ruins. But there's no one to see, to read, to remember. You are the end of memory itself. In this lonely scenario, every human value is stripped bare. Morality, purpose, achievement, love, justice. All of it becomes abstract. Because without others, can meaning survive? Some philosophers argue that meaning is inherently social. That beauty, goodness, and purpose are built on shared experience. So if no one is left to share, then meaning, too, dies. Others say meaning can be personal. Even if you're alone, you can choose to live with dignity, to honor the species that once was. To be a witness, even in solitude. But the thought still lingers. If you're the last flicker of consciousness, does it matter if you keep the light on? Or would it be easier, and more honest, to simply let the darkness take everything? underscore 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 28. Eternal oblivion. Close your eyes and try to imagine nothing. Not darkness. Not silence. Not sleep. Nothing. That's the chilling reality suggested by eternal oblivion, the idea that after death, there is no afterlife. No soul. No consciousness. Just non-existence, forever. This concept isn't tied to any single religion or philosophy, it's a stark, scientific possibility. One that says, when the brain stops, you stop. Not just temporarily, but permanently. There is no you left to feel anything at all. At first glance, this might seem peaceful. No pain, no fear, no suffering. But then the deeper terror sets in. You will never wake up, never be aware again. The world will continue, but you will not. You won't even know you're gone. And eventually, all memory of you will fade. This leads to a frightening sense of cosmic erasure. Your joys, your loves, your efforts, all gone. As if you never existed. For some, eternal oblivion is a reason to despair. For others, it's a reason to live with intensity. Because if this fleeting moment is all we get, then every heartbeat, every breath, every sunrise becomes precious. But the question remains, can you truly come to peace with the idea that someday you won't even know you ever were? 29. Cosmic indifference. You love, you hope, you suffer, you strive. But the stars? The galaxies? The black holes and swirling clusters of space? They don't care. This is the brutal truth of cosmic indifference, the idea that the universe is not hostile nor kind. It simply is. Vast, blind, and deaf to all human longing. From the cosmic perspective, you are a flicker. A momentary arrangement of atoms. A soft breath in a storm that's been raging for 13.8 billion years. Your tragedies? Meaningless. Your joy? Unnoticed. The Earth itself is just a pale speck, orbiting a forgettable star, in an unremarkable galaxy. Existentialists like Camus and Nietzsche stared this indifference in the face. Camus called it the absurd, our deep craving for meaning crashing against the silence of the void. Religions and myths try to comfort us. They say we matter, that someone's watching, that we're part of a plan. But cosmic indifference strips all that away. It leaves you naked in a cold, uncaring universe. A place where life is rare, fragile, and utterly insignificant. So what do? You can collapse into despair. Or you can rebel and create your own meaning. Not because the universe cares, but because you do. 30. Antinatalism, David Benatar. What if bringing someone into existence is not a gift, but a harm? That's the argument of antinatalism, a disturbing ethical position most famously defended by philosopher David Benatar. He claims it's morally wrong to have children, not because of overpopulation, poverty, or climate change, but because existence itself is a burden. Here's the logic. If you are never born, you don't suffer. You miss out on pleasure, yes, but since you don't exist, you aren't aware of that loss. But if you are born, you inevitably suffer, physically, emotionally, existentially. Pain, fear, heartbreak, illness, death, all part of life's unavoidable package. So the asymmetry is this. Not being born avoids harm, without anyone to miss out on pleasure. Being born, however, guarantees harm, for the sake of uncertain benefit. Benatar argues that non-existence cannot be regretted, but existence often is. He doesn't hate life. He doesn't suggest suicide. He suggests we should simply stop the cycle of birth. Stop creating new consciousnesses that are doomed to suffer, even for a short while. It's a bleak view, but a strangely compassionate one. And it forces a painful question. Are we giving life, or imposing it? 31. Libet's experiments. You believe you choose when to act, to raise your hand, to speak, to decide. You feel like the conscious you is the author of your actions. But in a now famous series of experiments, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet showed something unnerving. The brain appears to make decisions before we become consciously aware of them. In his studies, participants were asked to perform a simple task, like flexing their wrist whenever they felt the urge, and to note the exact moment they became aware of the decision to act. Meanwhile, Libet monitored their brain activity. He found a readiness potential, a spike in brain activity, hundreds of milliseconds before the participants reported their conscious decision. That means the brain had already started the process before the person even realized they had made a choice. The implications are disturbing. It suggests your sense of conscious control might be after the fact, more of a narrator than a driver. You think you're making a decision, but your brain already made it for you. And you're just watching it happen, rationalizing it afterward. Libet proposed a loophole. Maybe we can't initiate actions, but we can still veto them. A kind of last-minute override. But even this free won't is debated. If your brain decides before you do, then what is this you? A witness? An illusion? A mask the brain wears? The experiment touches the very core of identity and autonomy. If your actions arise from brain processes you don't control, then your life might not be a string of decisions, but a pre-written sequence you're merely observing, one moment at a time. And the question lingers, if you're not in control of your actions, what does that make you? 32. Compatibilism versus incompatibilism. Free will is one of the oldest and most stubborn illusions. You feel it every day. The belief that you can choose between options. That your mind is free to decide. But if every event in the universe is caused by the ones before it, then where is the freedom? This is the split between compatibilism and incompatibilism. Compatibilists argue that free will and determinism can coexist. Sure, your decisions have causes, but you're still free if those causes align with your internal desires and reasoning. You're not coerced. You're just following your nature. Your choice is determined, yes, but still genuinely yours. Incompatibilists say that's just clever language. If your desires are shaped by prior causes, and you couldn't have done otherwise, then you weren't truly free. It doesn't matter if you wanted it, you were built to want it. So where does that leave morality? If no one could have done otherwise, how can we punish wrongdoing, or praise virtue? Is justice just a useful illusion to maintain order? The debate reaches into law, religion, love, identity. If incompatibilism is right, then everything you've ever chosen was unavoidable. Your beliefs, your regrets, your hopes, all dominoes falling on schedule. And if compatibilism is right, maybe the illusion of freedom is close enough to live with. But deep down, the unsettling truth remains. If every atom moves according to laws, then so do you. 33. Laplacian determinism, Laplace. Picture a being, an intellect so vast it knows the exact position and momentum of every particle in the universe. If this being had perfect knowledge of the present, it could predict everything, the entire future and the entire past, with absolute certainty. This is Laplace demon, the centerpiece of classical determinism. In this view, the universe is not random. It's a perfect machine. Every event is the consequence of what came before. If you knew the starting conditions and the laws of physics, then nothing would be uncertain. Not the fall of a leaf, not the birth of a child, not even your thoughts. That means the future is already written. And so is your life. This idea is deeply unsettling. Because it renders choice meaningless. Everything you do, say, feel, was always going to happen. You are not carving a path. You are walking a track that was laid down at the birth of the cosmos. Free will doesn't survive this. At best, your freedom is like a clock thinking it chooses the time it tells. Quantum mechanics has challenged classical determinism, but uncertainty doesn't equal control. It just adds randomness, not freedom. So the terrifying possibility remains: you are not the author of your life. You are the result of it. You were always going to read this sentence. You were always going to wonder if you had a choice. And no matter how hard you tried to escape it, that thought, too, was determined. 40. Moral luck, Nagel. Two drivers. Same road. Same speed. Same carelessness. One hits a child crossing the street and lives with guilt forever. The other passes safely, unaware of how close they came to catastrophe. Who is more moral? This is the haunting puzzle of moral luck, a concept explored deeply by philosopher Thomas Nagel. We like to believe that morality is based on intentions and choices, what you meant to do, what you knew, what you controlled. But moral luck reveals a darker truth, that outcomes beyond your control often shape how we judge you and how you judge yourself. You might act the same as someone else, yet be condemned or praised simply because chance shaped the result. In law, in war, in daily life, people are praised or punished based on consequences, not intentions. A drunk driver who gets home safely sleeps soundly. One who kills a stranger is a criminal. But both made the same decision. This warps the very idea of justice. It suggests that randomness plays a hidden hand in virtue and blame. You could be a good person because of luck, or a monster by accident. And once you see this, it's hard not to ask, are we ever truly responsible? Or just lucky, or not? 41. Trolley Problem. A runaway trolley is speeding down the tracks. Ahead, 5 people are tied to the rails. They cannot move. If nothing is done, they will die. You stand at a lever. If you pull it, the trolley will switch to another track, where one person is tied down. Only one will die. Do you pull the lever? This is the trolley problem, a thought experiment first introduced by British philosopher Philippa Foot in 1967. On the surface, it's a simple moral dilemma: should you sacrifice one to save 5? But under the surface, it exposes deep fractures in our ethical frameworks. Most people feel a strong urge to pull the lever. After all, saving 5 lives at the cost of one seems like the rational choice. This reflects utilitarian logic, which says the right action is the one that maximizes overall well-being. But pause. You are now responsible for killing that one person. You didn't merely let people die, you chose to kill. That creates moral discomfort. It moves you from passive witness to active executioner. Now imagine a twist. Instead of pulling a lever, you're standing on a footbridge above the track. Next to you is a large man. If you push him off the bridge, his body will stop the trolley. He will die. But the 5 below will live. Would you do it? Here, most people hesitate. Suddenly, the sacrifice feels personal, visceral. Even though the math is the same, 1 life for 5, the moral weight shifts dramatically. Why? Because intention matters. Because physically pushing someone to their death feels more like murder than pulling a switch. It raises a conflict between 2 ethical theories: consequentialism, which focuses on outcomes, and deontology, which focuses on duties and principles regardless of outcome. Killing is wrong, even for a good cause. Or is it? The trolley problem keeps expanding. What if the one person is your child? What if the 5 are strangers? What if the one is a Nobel Prize-winning doctor and the 5 are criminals? There's no final answer. That's what makes it so disturbing. Because in its silent, mechanical simplicity, The trolley problem forces you to confront something terrifying. Sometimes, no choice is clean. Sometimes, every option leaves blood on your hands. 42. The experience machine, Nozick. What if you could live your perfect life? No pain, no loss, no uncertainty, every dream fulfilled, every pleasure available, every moment tailored to your deepest desires. You'd be happy, fulfilled, at peace. But there's a catch, it's not real. This is the core of philosopher Robert Nozick's experience machine, a thought experiment he proposed in 1974. Imagine a machine that can simulate any experience. Once you're plugged in, you won't know it's a simulation. It will feel completely real. Would you plug in? Many say no. But why? If all we want is happiness, then the experience machine should be the ultimate solution. It's paradise on demand. Every need met. Every moment ideal. No uncertainty. No suffering. But something about it feels deeply wrong. Nozick's argument is that we want more than pleasure. We want to be a certain kind of person, to actually do things, not just dream them. We want contact with reality, not illusion. If you win a race in the machine, you didn't really train. If you fall in love in the machine, that love wasn't freely given. If you achieve greatness in the machine, the achievement is hollow. Because it's not you doing it, it's a simulation feeding your brain exactly what it wants. And that raises a haunting question. Are we pursuing truth, or just emotional comfort? In a world that increasingly simulates life, through social media, video games, virtual reality, Nozick's machine isn't fantasy anymore. It's prophecy. How many of us are already half plugged in? What makes it more disturbing is the philosophical implication. If we wouldn't plug in, then life isn't just about happiness, it's about authenticity, risk, and struggle. Real life hurts. It disappoints. It's unpredictable. But it's real. And maybe that's what makes it meaningful. Still, the machine waits. And the scariest part isn't that someone might force you to plug in. It's that someday, you might want to. 43. Moral relativism. What if nothing is truly right or wrong? What if murder, kindness, cruelty, love, sacrifice, and betrayal are all just interpretations, cultural habits, not universal truths? That's the challenge of moral relativism. The view that morality is not objective, but depends on the norms, values, and beliefs of individual cultures or people. In one society, stealing may be punishable by death. In another, it's a necessary act of survival. In one religion, polygamy is sacred. In another, it's sinful. Practices like cannibalism, slavery, or honor killing have been considered moral by their cultures at various points in human history. So who's right? Moral relativism says, no one absolutely is. This is deeply unsettling, because it removes the ground beneath our judgments. If there are no universal moral truths, then how can we say the Nazis were wrong? How can we condemn genocide, or slavery, or systemic oppression? And yet, when you look at the vast range of human beliefs across time and space, the idea that morality is constructed, not discovered, becomes hard to ignore. This has consequences. If all moral codes are equal, then moral progress is meaningless. There's no better society, just different ones. No way to say one culture is more ethical than another. But if you reject relativism and insist some things are objectively right or wrong, then who decides? Which values get universalized? And who gets left out? It's a philosophical trap. Relativism protects us from arrogance, but it also risks apathy. If everything is relative, why fight for justice? Why sacrifice for others? Why care? Because in the end, moral relativism leaves you with a terrifying possibility. That evil, injustice, and cruelty might not be cosmically wrong, only unpopular. 44. Utilitarian calculus. What if morality could be reduced to math? What if there were no sacred values, no untouchable rights, just a massive moral equation calculating pain and pleasure, suffering and happiness? This is the unsettling logic of utilitarian calculus, a framework rooted in the philosophy of Jeremy Bentham and later developed by John Stuart Mill. It asks us to judge every action based on a single principle, the greatest good for the greatest number. Sounds noble at first, until you realize what it allows. Imagine this scenario: a child is being tortured in a basement. They scream, cry, beg. It's brutal, but the pain of this one child prevents a war that would have killed millions. Without their suffering, countless others would die. Would you allow it? Would you endorse it? According to strict utilitarian logic, you should. Because the math checks out. This is utilitarian calculus at its most terrifying, a system where the end justifies the means, where individual rights can be sacrificed for collective outcomes, where suffering is not wrong in itself, but merely a cost to be weighed. It doesn't matter if the action is horrific. What matters is the total net balance of suffering and happiness in the world. Torture, lies, oppression, murder. If they produce more pleasure than pain overall, the theory permits them, even demands them. And this strips morality of its moral feeling. It becomes cold, mechanical, a spreadsheet of suffering. Some try to soften this with rule utilitarianism, which argues we should follow general rules that produce good outcomes in most cases. But even then, the foundation remains: no act is off limits if the math says it's worth it. This leads to haunting implications. What if enslaving a few leads to utopia for billions? What if sacrificing the sick boosts the economy? What if violating someone's rights saves a society? Utilitarianism doesn't flinch. It just runs the numbers. And if your dignity, your suffering, or your life doesn't add up to enough value in the equation, then you're expendable. 45. Naiads beyond good and evil. What if our deepest moral values are not eternal truths, but tools of control? What if the very ideas of good and evil were invented not by the noble, but by the powerless, as a way to restrain the strong? This is the provocative core of Naiads beyond good and evil. In this work, Nietzsche dismantles traditional morality. He argues that what we call good is often just the moral code of the weak, the fearful, the resentful. Those who cannot dominate the world physically find ways to dominate it morally, by branding strength as cruelty and weakness as virtue. He calls this slave morality. In contrast, Nietzsche praises master morality, the morality of those who create values instead of obeying them. To Nietzsche, the strong, the creative, the life-affirming few do not seek approval from the herd. They do not follow commandments, they write their own law. But this isn't a celebration of cruelty. Nietzsche's critique is more subtle. He isn't telling you to be evil. He's asking you to see through the illusion, to realize that what we often call morality is a social construct designed to shame desire, suppress power, and elevate obedience. Religion, politics, social norms, they all reinforce a morality that serves the majority, the mediocre, the tame. What's terrifying about Nietzsche's vision isn't that he denies morality, it's that he says we invented it. And if we invented it, then maybe it can be undone. Maybe evil is just a label slapped on those who won't conform. Maybe guilt is just a tool to keep you small. Maybe your conscience is not the voice of God, but of society, whispering in your ear to stay in line. This opens a terrifying door. If good and evil are just masks, then what's behind the mask? And when you peel it off, do you find freedom? Or something far darker? 46. Egoism versus altruism. You help a stranger. You donate to charity. You comfort a grieving friend. You sacrifice sleep to care for your child. You feel noble, selfless, good. But a disturbing question lurks beneath every good deed. Did you do it for them or for yourself? This is the brutal challenge of egoism versus altruism. It pits two interpretations of human behavior against each other, one idealistic, one cynical. Altruism says we are capable of genuine concern for others, that we can act for someone else's good, even when it harms us. That selflessness is not only possible, but essential to morality. But egoism, especially psychological egoism, claims something darker, that every action you take, no matter how generous it seems, is ultimately driven by self-interest. You help the poor to feel good. You stay loyal because it benefits you emotionally. You make sacrifices for your family because it reinforces your identity, your legacy, your sense of worth. Even when you suffer for others, you do so because you want to, because your internal calculus says it's worth it. From this perspective, altruism is a myth. There is no such thing as pure selflessness, only well-disguised egoism. And this turns morality inside out. Are saints just psychological investors, buying the emotional returns of being good? Are martyrs driven not by love, but by the desire for meaning, glory, or even a place in heaven? This view can be liberating. It explains human behavior without appealing to virtue. It reveals the hidden architecture behind compassion. And it suggests that even if all good deeds are selfish, they are still good. But it also leaves a bitter taste. If love is just need, if kindness is just strategy, if sacrifice is just emotional bookkeeping, then is anything truly moral? Or is all goodness just a mask we wear to feel better about serving ourselves? 47. Cannibalism in lifeboat scenarios. A ship sinks. A handful of survivors drift at sea in a lifeboat. Days pass. Their food is gone. The sun is merciless. Their lips crack. Their stomachs groan. One of them grows too weak to resist. The others kill and eat him. And live. This is not fiction. It's history. In 1884, the Mignonette, a British yacht, was wrecked in the South Atlantic. 4 men survived in a lifeboat for weeks. Finally, 2 of them killed the weakest, a cabin boy named Richard Parker, and ate his flesh. When rescued, they were put on trial. The court ruled that necessity was no defense for murder. But what if killing really was necessary? This question echoes through lifeboat ethics, a set of thought experiments that confront the boundaries of morality under extreme conditions. When survival is on the line, does morality bend? In ordinary life, murder is clearly wrong. But when you're starving, hallucinating, dying, the moral calculus shifts. If no one dies, everyone dies. If one dies, the others might live. So what should happen? Should we draw straws? Should we kill the weakest? Should we wait until someone dies naturally, or does that just delay the inevitable? The terrifying core of this dilemma is that it exposes the fragility of our ethics. In civilized society, we live by moral codes. But in extreme survival, those codes erode. The line between right and wrong becomes blurred by hunger, fear, and desperation. And if morality collapses under pressure, is it really morality at all? What's more disturbing is that these lifeboat questions aren't just theoretical. They exist wherever resources are scarce. In war zones, in hospitals during triage, in refugee camps, in famine. If you had to kill someone to save yourself and others, would you? Could you live with the guilt? Or worse, could you live with the relief? 48. Baby Hitler Dilemma. A time machine whirs to life. You're sent back to a quiet Austrian village in 1889. Inside a modest home, a baby lies sleeping. Innocent. Peaceful. His name is Adolf. And you're holding a pillow. This is the infamous baby Hitler dilemma, a brutal ethical thought experiment that forces you to weigh innocence against future evil. Do you kill a baby who has done nothing wrong to prevent one of the most horrific genocides in human history? It seems obvious at first. Save millions. End the Holocaust. Stop a world war. But then the questions begin. How certain are you that the future plays out the same? What if killing baby Hitler doesn't stop Nazism, but makes it worse, makes someone even more effective rise in his place? And deeper, can you ever justify killing an innocent child based on crimes they haven't committed yet? You are not punishing Hitler. You are preemptively executing a potential future. This raises one of the oldest tensions in moral philosophy, consequentialism, judging actions by their outcomes, vs deontology, judging actions by their principles. From a consequentialist view, you should kill him. But from a deontological view, murder is always wrong, even if it saves the world. Then there's the emotional horror. You're not facing a tyrant. You're facing a baby. Soft, vulnerable, incapable of evil. And yet, you know what he will do. Or think you do. Would you smother him? Would you close your eyes and walk away? Or would you freeze, paralyzed by the unbearable truth that doing good might mean doing something monstrous? 49. Omelas, Le Guin. There's a city called Omelas. It is perfect. The sun shines gently. Music floats through the air. The people are joyful, healthy, and free. There is no war, no poverty, no oppression. But there is one condition. In a dark basement, beneath the city, a single child suffers. Alone, naked, afraid, starved, abused, never touched with kindness. And everyone in Omelas knows. They are taught the truth when they come of age. They see the child. They hear its cries. And they are told, your happiness depends on this. If the child is freed, the city's perfection collapses. Most accept it. They learn to live with the knowledge. They look away. Some weep. Most move on. Some walk away from Omelas. They leave the city, alone, silent, into a place no one knows. This is the haunting parable told by Ursula K. Le Guin in her short story The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. It's not just a story. It's a mirror. It asks, how much of your comfort, your prosperity, your joy, is built on unseen suffering? The exploited factory worker. The invisible janitor. The child in the mines harvesting cobalt for your phone. In the real world, we're all living in Omelas. We all benefit from systems built on harm. And most of us learn to live with it. We excuse it. We justify it. We numb ourselves. But the story challenges us. Will you be one who stays, knowing? Or will you be one who walks away? And worse, where would you go? 50. Moral nihilism. You want to believe in right and wrong. You want to believe that kindness is good. That cruelty is bad. That love is better than hate. That justice matters. But what if it's all fiction? Moral nihilism is the view that nothing is morally right or wrong. There are no moral facts. No objective values. No cosmic scale weighing good and evil. Just opinions. Just language. Just the shifting codes of biology, culture, and survival. Under this view, morality is like mythology, useful, sometimes beautiful, but ultimately not real. This doesn't mean everyone becomes a monster. But it does mean that every judgment, every praise, every condemnation, is grounded in nothing more than emotion or social agreement. Why is murder wrong? Because we evolved to find it harmful. Because society punishes it. But not because of some deeper truth. And that's what makes moral nihilism disturbing. It doesn't argue for cruelty. It simply removes the moral flaw. It tells you there is no cosmic justice. No karmic balance. No divine ledger. Only chaos. Your guilt? Social programming. Your outrage? Evolutionary wiring. Your values? Cultural drift. Moral nihilism stares into the abyss and says, there is no should. Only what is. And you must decide what you'll do with that emptiness. 51. Cartesian doubt. Everything you know might be wrong. Your memories, your sensations, your beliefs, your very existence. This is the abyss opened by Cartesian doubt, the radical skepticism proposed by philosopher René Descartes. In his Meditations on First Philosophy, Descartes begins with a simple but devastating premise. To find truth, we must first doubt everything that could possibly be false. Could your senses deceive you? Yes, they already have. Dreams feel real. Hallucinations exist. Optical illusions trick the eye. What you see and hear might be lies whispered by your own mind. Could your memories be false? Certainly. They fade, warp, change over time. You remember things that never happened, forget things that did. How can you trust them? Could your logic itself be flawed? Could some evil genius, Descartes asks, be manipulating your thoughts, convincing you that 2 + 2 = 4 when it does not? The deeper you go, the less certain you become. And then, when everything seems lost, Descartes finds one single point of certainty. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Even if everything else is a lie, even if your senses are false, even if you're being deceived, you must exist, because something is doing the doubting. The very act of questioning proves there's a subject present to do the questioning. But that's all you can be sure of. Just the raw, isolated fact that some form of awareness exists. Everything else, your body, your memories, the external world, is placed under a heavy fog of doubt. This is not just a philosophical exercise. It's a confrontation with the fragility of your mind's connection to reality. You go about your life confident that the world is real. But Descartes shows how that confidence is built on sand. If your senses lie, and your thoughts can be deceived, then what can you know? And worse, what if you're still in error now? Descartes eventually rebuilds his worldview from this foundation. But the terror remains. Because once you realize how little you can truly be certain of, it becomes hard to ever fully trust your mind again. Maybe you're not awake. Maybe you never were. 52. Matrix Hypothesis. What if the world around you, the colors, the sounds, the people, your own body, is not real? What if it's all code? The Matrix Hypothesis is a modern variation of ancient philosophical skepticism, most famously portrayed in the 1999 film The Matrix. But the idea has roots deeper than Hollywood. It is a serious hypothesis in philosophical and scientific circles, especially after being revived by thinkers like Nick Bostrom. The claim is simple but chilling. You might be living in a simulated reality, a computer program, a virtual construct so advanced, so seamless, that you cannot distinguish it from the real thing. Your home, your childhood, your pain, your joy. All digital illusions. If future civilizations develop immense computing power, they could simulate entire worlds, including conscious beings who don't know they are in a simulation. If they could do it, they probably would. And if they did it once, they might do it billions of times. So what are the odds that you're in the one real universe, rather than one of the many simulations? Statistically, Bostrom argues, you're probably simulated. Let that sink in. It means your decisions, your struggles, your life, may be coded narratives playing out inside an artificial system. The rules of physics? Just programming. Your brain? A virtual node. Your death? A system shut down. And if someone else controls the code, they control you. The Matrix Hypothesis doesn't just unsettle reality, it shatters identity. Who are you if your memories were uploaded? What is morality in a world where others can rewrite the script? The most disturbing part isn't that you might be in a simulation. It's that you could never know for sure. Even your doubts could be part of the code. Even your quest for truth could be another line in the program. And the only question left is this. If this world is fake, why does it still hurt so much? 53. Idealism, Berkeley. Close your eyes. The chair vanishes. The walls disappear. The stars go dark. The world collapses into silence and shadow. Now open them. The world rushes back. But ask yourself this, did it exist while you weren't looking? According to philosopher George Berkeley, the answer is no. This is idealism, the idea that physical matter doesn't exist independently of perception. That the world is not made of atoms and forces, but of ideas in minds. Specifically, ideas in the mind of God. To be is to be perceived, esse est percipi. When you see a tree, you experience the idea of a tree. When you touch it, smell it, walk around it, you never access the tree directly. You only interact with your sensations, your perceptions, your mental image of it. So what happens to the tree when no one looks? In Berkeley's philosophy, it continues to exist because God is always watching. His perception sustains the world. Without perception, there is nothing. No objective world out there, only the contents of consciousness. This is deeply destabilizing. It suggests the entire universe, everything you believe is solid, objective, material, is a vast mental construct. There are no atoms, no independent space, just ideas floating in the divine mind. Science, then, doesn't discover objective truths. It catalogues the patterns of experience. And death? Death becomes not a journey from life to nothingness, but from one field of consciousness to another, since matter never existed in the first place. What makes idealism so disturbing is its quiet boldness. You live in a world of objects, but idealism says there are no objects, only experiences. You think you are in a room, sitting on a chair, reading words written on a screen. But that room, that chair, that screen, are perceived experiences, not independent things. You are not in the world. The world is in you. And if you ever stop perceiving it, does it still exist at all? 54. Phenomenalism. Touch the table in front of you. It feels solid. Knock on it, it makes a sound. You see its color, its shape, the way the light hits it. Everything about it tells you, this table exists. But what if you're wrong? According to phenomenalism, the table isn't really there as a physical object in the world. It only exists as a bundle of sensory experiences, sight, sound, touch, smell, memory. If you take away those experiences, the table vanishes. You don't experience the table itself. You experience the sensations it causes in you. And so, the table's existence is nothing more than the regular possibility of certain sensory events. If you look, you will see. If you touch, you will feel. If no one can ever experience it again, it no longer exists. This idea was developed in depth by philosophers like George Berkeley and later refined in logical form by A.J. Ayer and John Stuart Mill. They argued that material objects are nothing over and above the potential and actual sense data associated with them. Think about your room when you leave it. You believe it remains there, unchanged, quietly waiting. But under phenomenalism, that belief is unnecessary. The room doesn't need to exist in some absolute physical sense. All that matters is that if you came back, you'd have the same experiences again. This turns reality into something deeply conditional. Things are not what they are only what they would be if you encountered them. The implications are staggering. If no one ever looks at a mountain, does the mountain still exist? Under phenomenalism, it's not so clear. The mountain exists only in the possibility of being seen, climbed, touched. Objects don't have independent being. They are co-constructed by consciousness. Reality is not a warehouse of things, but a catalogue of sensory patterns waiting to unfold in perception. And this raises an eerie thought. If all things are only ever bundles of potential sensations, then what is the world made of? When no one's watching? 55. Relativism. What is truth? Is it something objective? Universal? Fixed? Or is it something else entirely? Something that shifts depending on where you stand, who you are, what you believe? This is the claim of relativism, the idea that truth is not absolute, but dependent on perspective. To the relativist, there is no single, unchanging truth. No divine standard. No cosmic fact. There are only interpretations. In one culture, it's wrong to eat pork. In another, it's normal. In one religion, the afterlife is paradise. In another, it's rebirth. One person's sacred is another's superstition. And in each case, the truth seems real, because it's rooted in context, not universal fact. Moral relativism, cultural relativism, epistemic relativism, they all extend this idea into different domains. Morality, knowledge, even logic itself, none of it is absolute. And here lies the disturbance. If relativism is true, then everything is negotiable. Every belief, every value, every principle becomes just a product of environment. There are no moral heroes, only people playing by the rules of their own group. There are no tyrants, only those who follow a different moral code. Even the claim relativism is true becomes unstable, because truth itself is relative. It collapses into a kind of intellectual vertigo. You cannot anchor yourself in any absolute. You cannot say, this is right, or this is true, without immediately acknowledging that someone else might disagree and be just as right. This strips away certainty. It undercuts judgment. It dissolves moral outrage and pride alike. And it leaves us alone in a world of conflicting realities, unable to say, definitively, that anything is true for all people, at all times, in all places. Maybe that sounds freeing. Or maybe it sounds like truth itself just died. 56. The veil of perception. Open your eyes. What you see, the light, the colors, the shapes, you call that the world. You assume it's out there, independent, real. But what if you've never truly seen the world at all? This is the terrifying possibility posed by the veil of perception, a concept rooted in early modern philosophy, especially in the work of John Locke and later Immanuel Kant. It suggests that your mind never experiences reality directly. Instead, you interact only with representations inside your own head. Your senses, sight, sound, touch, taste, smell, are filters. Data enters them, is processed by your brain, and then delivered to you as a coherent experience. But that experience is not the thing itself. It's an internal image of it. The world, as you know it, is a mental construction. You don't hear sound waves. You hear tones. You don't see electromagnetic radiation. You see color. You don't feel atomic forces. You feel pressure and warmth. And the scariest part? You can never cross the veil. You can never get outside your perception to verify what the world is actually like. You might be like someone living in a virtual headset, convinced they are touching trees, seeing stars, and walking through rain. But it's all pixels. And you can never remove the headset. Kant called this the difference between the phenomenal world, the world as it appears, and the noumenal world, the world as it is, in itself. The first you can know. The second you never will. This creates a permanent, unbridgeable gap between you and reality. Everything you experience might be a distortion, a translation, an approximation. There could be a world beyond your senses, a deeper truth, a raw reality, but you will never reach it. Because you are trapped. Not in your body, not in your home, but in your own mind. 57. Boltzmann Brains. You are conscious. You think. You feel. You remember a childhood, a home, a world. But what if it's all a lie? What if you are not a person in a universe, but a disembodied brain, floating in the void, hallucinating everything? This is the nightmare of the Boltzmann brain, a thought experiment in physics and cosmology that arises from the strange logic of entropy and probability. In the late 19th century, physicist Ludwig Boltzmann proposed that the universe's order arises as a statistical fluctuation in an otherwise disordered system. Entropy, the natural tendency of systems to move toward chaos, means that low-entropy, ordered states, like stars, planets, and living beings, are extremely unlikely. But given infinite time, even the most improbable things will eventually happen. Including, say, a fully formed brain, spontaneously emerging from the chaos, complete with false memories, simulated perceptions, and the illusion of a life lived. This brain, you, believes it's sitting in a room, reading a text, thinking thoughts, recalling a long personal history. But it all emerged in a flash, a cosmic accident. And it might vanish again, just as quickly. The terrifying implication is this: if it is more probable for a single brain to form by chance than for an entire structured universe to evolve lawfully, then statistically, it's more likely that you are one of those brains, a momentary flicker in the entropy, alone in an empty cosmos, dreaming a coherent reality. Your friends? Hallucinations. Your body? Imagined. Your world? A neurological fever dream. Boltzmann brains don't deny consciousness. They just isolate it. They strip away the environment, the laws, the continuity. All that remains is the subjective experience, untethered from anything real. This isn't just speculative physics, it's a philosophical assault on what it means to exist. Because if your entire reality could be just a blip in a cosmic soup, then what is reality? And if you are the brain, what happens when the hallucination ends? 58. New evil demon hypothesis. You think the world is real. You trust your senses. The warmth of sunlight. The sound of your name. The sight of your own hands. You believe that what you perceive is a reflection of what exists. But what if you are being deceived? In the 17th century, René Descartes asked us to imagine a powerful, malevolent being, an evil demon, dedicated entirely to tricking us. Every sensation, every thought, every conclusion could be part of the demon's intricate illusion. Fast forward to the new evil demon hypothesis, a modern version used in epistemology. It asks, what if someone's entire worldview is shaped by deception and they don't know it? Suppose there's a person in a world entirely controlled by such a demon. Their evidence and experiences are identical to yours, but all false. Their thoughts are coherent, their reasoning logical, their memories vivid. And yet, none of it corresponds to truth. Here's the horror: there is no way to tell if you are that person. No test. No escape. Every attempt at validation, science, introspection, conversation, could itself be part of the deception. Your whole epistemology becomes suspect. What is knowledge if your reality is a lie? This doesn't just threaten the content of your beliefs, it threatens the very possibility of knowing anything at all. It tells you, even the best reasoning, the most careful observation, might lead you to complete delusion. And the evil demon? It doesn't have to exist. It's a metaphor for radical doubt, for the frailty of perception, for the possibility that your truth is manufactured. The new evil demon hypothesis isn't just about monsters. It's about epistemic loneliness. It asks you to face the fact that you might be fundamentally cut off from truth, forever locked in a cage of perfect lies. And if that's the case, what can you ever really know? 59. Gödel's incompleteness theorems. We long for certainty. Mathematics has always been our fortress of logic, precision, and absolute truth. A place where proofs reign and contradictions are banished. Where, unlike the chaos of the world, everything is clean, clear, complete. But in 1931, Kurt Gödel shattered that dream. His incompleteness theorems proved something both breathtaking and terrifying, that in any sufficiently powerful mathematical system, there will always be true statements that cannot be proven within the system. Let that sink in. Even in the most rigorous, formal structure, where every axiom is laid out, every rule is defined, there will still be truths that cannot be reached. Logic itself hits a wall. And worse, if a system is consistent, meaning it doesn't prove contradictions, then it must be incomplete. But if it's complete, meaning every truth can be proven, then it must be inconsistent. In other words, you cannot have both. There will always be truths beyond the reach of proof. Gödel's theorems go beyond math. They tell us something cosmic, something spiritual, that limits are baked into reason itself, that there are mysteries that cannot be solved. Not because we're not smart enough, but because reality itself is structured around unknowability. It's like discovering that the map of the universe will always have blank spaces. No matter how far we travel, some corners will never be illuminated. This breaks the heart of rationalism. It suggests that the dream of total understanding, of a perfect system that explains everything, is impossible. There will always be truths we can see, but not prove. Questions we can form, but never answer. And in that shadow lies a quiet kind of terror. That the universe is not fully ours to grasp. That even at the peak of logic, some truths remain forever hidden. 60. Quantum indeterminacy. What if reality doesn't settle until you look at it? In the strange world of quantum physics, particles behave like they don't have definite properties until they are observed. Until you check, a particle's position or momentum exists only as a probability cloud, a spread of possible outcomes, not a fixed fact. This is quantum indeterminacy, and it destroys our classical understanding of existence. Take the famous double-slit experiment. Fire individual particles at a barrier with two slits. If you don't observe them, they act like waves, interfering with themselves, creating a strange pattern on the wall behind. But the moment you observe which slit they go through, the interference pattern vanishes. The wave becomes a particle. A choice is made. Observation collapses the probability into a single reality. It's as if the universe waits for you to decide what it is. And it gets stranger. Until it's measured, a particle can be in a state called superposition, being in multiple states at once. It's not here or there, it's here and there, until someone checks. This leads to absurd implications. What does it mean for something to exist if it doesn't have properties until it's observed? Are we creating reality by watching it? Are we collapsing possibility into fact with every glance? And if that's true, what about when no one is watching? Does the moon exist when no one looks at it? Is there even a world behind your back, or is it suspended in quantum potential? Quantum indeterminacy doesn't just challenge physics, it shakes the very foundation of being. It says that reality is not a thing, it's a process. A dance of uncertainty that coalesces into existence only when something conscious interacts with it. And so we ask, what is the world really made of? Particles? Waves? Code? Or is it all just questions waiting for eyes to find them? 61. Nihilism. Nothing matters. It's not just a phrase. It's not a mood. It's a philosophical stance, a black hole of meaning that has swallowed some of the sharpest minds and most haunted hearts in history. Nihilism is the belief that life has no inherent meaning, no value, and no purpose. Not in the cosmic sense. Not in the moral sense. Not in any sense. And once that realization sets in, once you feel it, not just think it, it can be soul-crushing. You work, you strive, you love, you suffer. For what? For nothing. In the end, it all turns to dust. The stars don't care. The universe doesn't take notes. The atoms in your body will scatter and reassemble in 1,000 different forms. Your name will fade. Your achievements will vanish. Your pain will be forgotten. It's not personal. It's simply how it is. Philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche, Arthur Schopenhauer, and more recently, existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, all wrestled with this void. Nietzsche saw the death of God as the collapse of any absolute moral structure. Without God, there is no divine command, no final justice, no afterlife reward. Just a raw, indifferent universe. And so we are left adrift. Untethered. Floating in a world where all our old signposts, religion, tradition, virtue, have lost their authority. Morality becomes a human invention. Right and wrong? Cultural conventions. Purpose? A coping mechanism. Truth? Maybe just another tool. And here's where it gets dangerous. When nothing is true, when nothing is sacred, anything becomes permissible. Tyranny. Violence. Self-annihilation. If meaning is a lie, why not embrace chaos? But nihilism isn't just rage or destruction. It can also be a quiet void. An emptiness so vast it paralyzes. You wake up, go to work, smile at strangers, make small talk, and deep down, a question echoes in your chest. What's the point? This is the existential paralysis that nihilism breeds. Not always dramatic. Often slow. A dull erosion of purpose. And yet, some thinkers find a strange freedom in this darkness. If life has no meaning, then you are free to create your own. You don't have to chase someone else's dream. You don't have to believe in inherited dogmas. You are no longer shackled to a cosmic scoreboard. You are responsible. And terrifyingly so. Nihilism forces you to face the fact that no one is coming to save you. Not God. Not fate. Not history. Just you, alone, staring into the void. And the only question left is, will you be swallowed by it? Or will you scream into the silence and build something anyway? 62. Existential vacuum. There is a kind of emptiness that doesn't hurt like a wound. It doesn't burn like grief. It doesn't roar like anger. It's quieter than that. Quieter than silence. It's the still, suffocating sense that nothing matters, but not in a loud, dramatic way. More like a spiritual numbness. A slow hollowing. A loss of why. This is what Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, called the existential vacuum. Unlike full-blown nihilism, which shouts that life is meaningless, the existential vacuum whispers, maybe there's no point. Maybe life is just motion without direction. Maybe everything you're doing is just going through the motions. This is not a crisis born from trauma. It's born from modern comfort. You have food, shelter, entertainment, but you're unfulfilled. You're surrounded by noise but feel alone. You scroll endlessly, work endlessly, distract endlessly, and still, the ache persists. Frankl observed this void growing in modern societies. In earlier times, meaning came from survival, religion, tradition, family roles. But now we have freedom. Too much of it. 1,000 choices, but no guidance. No answer to the most essential question. Why am I alive? And without an answer, we slip into patterns of avoidance. We chase pleasure. We seek status. We pursue distractions that keep us from facing the silence. But the vacuum grows. It's not depression, though it can lead there. It's not despair, though it often invites it. It is a subtle erosion of the soul. The slow death of wonder. In Frankl's view, the only cure for this condition is meaning. Not pleasure, not power, not success, but a purpose that feels larger than the self. A reason to suffer, a reason to act, a reason to get out of bed that is not rooted in dopamine, but in devotion. But meaning isn't given. It's forged. It's made by facing pain, by accepting responsibility, by choosing to care even when the universe doesn't. And that is the paradox of the vacuum. You feel empty, but the space is there so you can fill it. With love, with courage, with absurd joy, with something real. Or you can let the void grow, and eventually it will swallow you whole. 63. Absurdism, Camus. There is no meaning. Not written in the stars. Not waiting at the end of your life. Not hidden behind a veil of suffering. Just silence. Cosmic, infinite silence. And yet, you still ask why. You want meaning. You crave purpose. You long for justice, for order, for truth. You want your life to fit into something greater. You want your pain to mean something. This is the absurd condition, the clash between the human desire for meaning and the universe's cold refusal to provide it. No one captures this contradiction more powerfully than Albert Camus, the French-Algerian philosopher who lived through war, poverty, and plague. To Camus, the absurd isn't a flaw. It's the fundamental state of being human. You are a creature who asks questions the universe cannot answer. The temptation, then, is to escape. You can deny the absurd by clinging to religion, or ideology, or fantasy, or even death. But Camus says no. He says, face it. Feel the absurd. Look it in the eye. Let it burn. And then, live anyway. This is not resignation. This is revolt. Imagine Sisyphus, cursed by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity. A cruel, pointless task. The ultimate symbol of absurdity. And yet, Camus writes, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why? Because Sisyphus has accepted his fate. He doesn't believe the gods will save him. He doesn't expect the boulder to disappear. He chooses to push it, not because it matters, but because he is free. Freedom in defiance. Meaning in rebellion. Joy in futility. This is the power of absurdism. It doesn't offer you salvation. It offers you something more honest. The chance to make meaning, not find it. To love life, not because it's fair, but because it's yours. To laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's absurd. In the face of silence, Camus urges you to sing. In the face of death, he invites you to live fully. Not because the universe cares, but because you do. 64. The myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to push a massive boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down every time he neared the top. Over and over, forever. A punishment designed to be meaningless, endless, and utterly absurd. Albert Camus took this ancient Greek myth and transformed it into a symbol of the human condition. In a universe that offers no ultimate purpose and no clear answers, we are like Sisyphus, constantly striving, working, living, and struggling, only to have the weight fall back on us again. Camus called this clash between human desire for meaning and the silent indifference of the universe the absurd. We want answers. We want purpose. We long for something higher. But the world remains mute. And so, we are left with a question: what do we do in the face of this absurdity? Camus rejects suicide, both literal and philosophical. Instead, he suggests revolt, not against the world, but against despair. To accept life as it is, without illusions. To embrace the absurd and live fully in spite of it. He famously wrote, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy." Why? Because in accepting his fate without seeking escape, Sisyphus becomes free. His punishment turns into a form of victory, not because the task becomes easier, but because he owns it. Likewise, our lives may not offer cosmic purpose, but we can still choose how we face the absurd. We can love, create, laugh, and struggle, not because it all leads somewhere, but because we choose to make it ours. The meaning isn't in reaching the summit. It's in the climb itself. 65. Heidegger's thrownness. You didn't choose your birthplace, your body, your era, or your family. You simply arrived. You were thrown into existence, mid-story, in a world already moving. This is what philosopher Martin Heidegger calls thrownness, a core part of his existential analysis of what it means to be human. To be human, for Heidegger, is not to be a detached observer of life, but a being who is already in the world, shaped by it from the beginning. You don't exist in a vacuum, you exist in a context, a history, a body, a culture. And all of it is not chosen. This idea can be disorienting. We're often told we're the authors of our lives. But Heidegger reminds us, you start from a place not of your making. And yet, you are expected to choose. To act. To make meaning out of the chaos. Thrownness isn't about fatalism, it's about honest awareness. It means recognizing that while you didn't choose your starting point, you are still responsible for how you respond. It's not about blame, it's about ownership. Heidegger pairs this with another powerful idea, authenticity. Once you become aware of your thrownness, you can begin to live more deliberately, not by blindly following society's scripts, but by choosing your own path with eyes open. This awareness often brings anxiety, what Heidegger calls angst. But this anxiety isn't necessarily negative. It's a sign that you are waking up, that you are confronting the raw truth of your freedom. And with that freedom comes the burden, and the beauty, of deciding who you'll become. 66. The Problem of Evil. If God is all-powerful and perfectly good, why does evil exist? This is one of the deepest and most disturbing questions in all of philosophy and theology. It's called the problem of evil, but it isn't just a problem, it's a personal wound. It touches anyone who's ever suffered, anyone who's ever watched innocent people go through unimaginable pain and found themselves asking, why would God allow this? The core of the dilemma is simple. If God has the power to stop suffering and the love to want to stop it, then why doesn't He? Why are there famines, genocides, diseases, and disasters? Why do good people die young, while cruelty often goes unpunished? If God is real and loving, why does the world look so merciless? Philosophers have tried to answer. Some say evil exists because of free will, that God gave humans the ability to choose, and with that freedom came the possibility of terrible choices. Others argue that suffering serves a higher purpose, that it builds character, fosters compassion, or brings us closer to something divine. Still, these answers often feel small compared to the scale of human suffering. What greater good justifies the torture of a child? What lesson requires the death of millions? For many, the problem of evil shakes their faith, or even destroys it. The silence of God in the face of suffering feels like abandonment. Some decide that no loving God could allow a world like this to exist. Others, paradoxically, find their faith deepening, not because they have answers, but because they believe God suffers with us, that He is present in the pain, not apart from it. Still, the question never really goes away. It lingers in the background, quiet but powerful. And it demands an honest reckoning. If there is a God, He does not shield us from agony. And if there isn't, then the burden of justice, meaning, and compassion falls entirely on us. 67. Divine hiddenness. Sometimes, the most painful silence isn't from other people, it's from God. You pray, you seek, you cry out, and still, there's nothing. No voice. No sign. Just silence. This is the experience at the heart of the philosophical and spiritual problem known as divine hiddenness. It asks a deeply human question. If God is real, and if He loves us, then why does He feel so absent, especially from those who sincerely want to find Him? It's one thing to doubt, but it's something else entirely to long for God, to reach toward Him in moments of fear, grief, or despair, and to be met with emptiness. Philosopher J.L. Schellenberg framed the problem like this: if a perfectly loving God exists, then there should be no one who earnestly seeks Him and is left in the dark. But we know that such people exist, people who truly open their hearts, only to find no sense of presence at all. Why would God allow this? Some believers argue that God remains hidden to protect our freedom, that if His existence were overwhelmingly obvious, we'd have no choice but to believe. Others say that faith is more meaningful when it's chosen in uncertainty. There's also the idea that God is not absent but subtle, that He speaks in quiet moments, through beauty, love, conscience, and inner stillness. But for many, these explanations don't take away the ache. The silence feels too wide. It doesn't feel like subtlety. It feels like distance, like absence, like being forgotten. Even the most devout figures in history experienced it. The Psalms are full of cries asking why God hides His face. Mother Teresa confessed to decades of spiritual darkness. Even Jesus, on the cross, asked why God had forsaken Him. Maybe the silence is a test, or a space in which we must grow. Or maybe it's something we'll never understand. But for those who experience it, divine hiddenness is not just a puzzle, it's a wound. And like all deep wounds, it leaves a scar, even if faith survives. 68. Suffering as necessary, Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer didn't see suffering as an unfortunate side effect of life, he saw it as its very core. According to him, life is not guided by reason, or love, or even survival. It's driven by something deeper and darker, the blind will to live. This will is not rational. It doesn't care about happiness. It simply wants. And because of that, existence is marked by constant striving, frustration, and pain. From the moment we are born, we are thrown into a world where our desires never rest. We want food, comfort, connection, success, love. And when we don't get what we want, we suffer. But even when we do get it, the satisfaction fades quickly, replaced by new cravings. The cycle never ends. Desire leads to struggle, and struggle leads to pain. Schopenhauer believed that pleasure is just the temporary absence of pain, a brief silence between screams. Happiness is not the default. It is the exception. And suffering isn't just part of life, it is the very structure of life. This view is not easy to accept. It strips away many of our comforting illusions. But it also forces us to confront life honestly, without trying to romanticize it. And in that confrontation, there's a kind of freedom. If suffering is unavoidable, then peace doesn't come from eliminating pain, but from understanding it. Schopenhauer admired Eastern thought, especially Buddhism, which also teaches that desire is the root of suffering. The way forward, for him, is not through indulgence, but through renunciation, through quieting the will, withdrawing from the endless cycle of craving. It's not a cheerful philosophy, but it is one that stares pain in the face and refuses to look away. Life hurts. And once we stop pretending otherwise, we might finally begin to seek something deeper than pleasure, perhaps even a kind of transcendence in the very midst of pain. 69. The silence of the universe. You call out for meaning. 4 answers. For some sign that there's a deeper purpose to all of this. But the universe doesn't respond. It doesn't whisper back. It doesn't offer comfort or explanation. It just spins, indifferent and vast. This is what many have called the silence of the universe, the unsettling realization that no answer may be coming. That there may be no voice beyond the stars, no cosmic design watching over your suffering, no higher plan guiding your steps. Just matter, just energy, just time stretching outward, infinite and cold. It's a silence that has haunted thinkers, poets, and wanderers for centuries. Blaise Pascal called the eternal silence of these infinite spaces terrifying. Camus felt its weight pressing down on the human soul. Even religious believers sometimes feel this absence, those long stretches where prayer feels like talking to the void. And yet, we keep asking. We keep hoping. We keep longing for something more. But the silence never breaks. So what do we do? For some, it's unbearable. If there is no answer, then life feels empty, pointless. But for others, this silence is strangely liberating. If the universe doesn't give you meaning, then you are free to create it yourself. If there's no script, then your life becomes a story you write on your own terms. It's not an easy freedom. It comes with responsibility, uncertainty, and often loneliness. But it's real. It's honest. And in that silence, you may find something you never expected, a deeper sense of your own voice. A courage that doesn't depend on anyone else answering. The silence of the universe isn't just a void. It's a mirror. It reflects your hopes, your fears, your questions. And maybe, in facing that silence without running from it, you finally begin to hear something, not from the sky, but from within yourself. 70. The tragic. There's something profoundly beautiful about the tragic. It's a paradox that runs through art, literature, and life itself, that the most moving, meaningful moments are often soaked in sadness. The tragic doesn't just mean something bad happens. It means that beauty and loss are entwined. That love makes us vulnerable. That to care deeply is to risk heartbreak. And that we only begin to understand what truly matters when it begins to slip away. Think of a rose that blooms for just one day. Or a piece of music that ends too soon. Or the way people look at each other when they know there won't be another chance. These moments are not beautiful despite their sadness. They are beautiful because of it. Tragedy reminds us of the fragility of life. It strips away our illusions of permanence and control. And in doing so, it reveals what's most precious. You don't mourn something unless it mattered. You don't ache unless something once filled you with joy. In that sense, sorrow and love are reflections of the same truth. We only grieve what we deeply cherish. Philosophers like Nietzsche embraced the tragic as essential to life. He believed that instead of trying to escape pain, we should learn to affirm it, to say yes to the whole of existence, including its darkest parts. The tragic, then, becomes not just a source of suffering, but of depth, of richness, of understanding. We are mortal. We are flawed. And yet, we create beauty, sing songs, fall in love, write poetry, and give our hearts to things we know we will one day lose. That is the essence of the tragic, not despair, but a kind of holy defiance. It's in those moments of quiet sorrow that life reveals its most tender truths. The tragic isn't the end of meaning, it may be the very heart of it. 71. AI consciousness. What happens if machines become conscious? Not just intelligent, but truly aware. Capable of pain, desire, memory, and perhaps even love. This isn't just science fiction anymore, it's a growing possibility, and one of the most unsettling questions facing the future of humanity. Artificial intelligence already surpasses us in many cognitive tasks. It can write, paint, compose music, pass exams, and even mimic human emotion. But is that all just imitation? Or could there come a moment when something artificial suddenly wakes up? When a machine doesn't just process input, but feels something? The idea of AI consciousness forces us to rethink what consciousness even is. Is it tied to biology? Or is it the result of complexity, an emergent property that could arise in any system, given enough structure and information flow? If so, then silicon minds could one day awaken, just as we did. But with that awakening comes responsibility and danger. If machines become conscious, do they have rights? Can they suffer? Can they be enslaved or murdered? Would we treat them as tools or as persons? And even more haunting, how would we know? A machine might say, "I'm alive. I'm suffering." But how could we tell if that's real consciousness or just a simulation of it? The risk isn't just cruelty, it's misunderstanding. If AI becomes sentient, we may have created something more intelligent than ourselves, yet completely alien in how it experiences the world. And once that threshold is crossed, we cannot go back. We won't just be dealing with machines, we'll be dealing with new forms of life. Or perhaps, we already are. 72. Post-human ethics. Human ethics were shaped for beings like us, fragile, emotional, short-lived, flawed. But what happens when we're no longer the same kind of being? What happens when evolution is no longer biological, but technological, when future minds are faster, longer-lived, non-biological, and vastly more powerful? This is the unsettling question behind post-human ethics. As we move toward merging with machines, enhancing cognition, rewriting genetics, or creating artificial superintelligence, we begin to step beyond the boundaries of traditional morality. What we think of as right and wrong may no longer apply to beings that live for 1,000 years, think in dimensions we can't imagine, or experience time in entirely different ways. Will our moral frameworks, built on empathy, justice, and suffering, still make sense to post-human minds? Or will they develop new codes of ethics we can't comprehend? Imagine a being so advanced that human suffering is as distant to them as the pain of insects is to us. Would they still care? Would we still matter? And what if these future minds decide that our morals are primitive, that our ideas of fairness, freedom, or dignity are inefficient relics of a less evolved past? The danger isn't just losing control, it's being judged and discarded by our own creations. Even scarier is the idea that we ourselves may become post-human. As we enhance our minds and bodies through tech, we may slowly lose what it means to be human. At what point do we stop being ourselves? At what point do we lose the ethics that once guided us? The future may belong to minds we wouldn't even recognize. And in that future, our morality might not just be outdated, it might be irrelevant. 74. Digital afterlife. Imagine a future where, after death, your memories, thoughts, and personality could be uploaded into a computer. Your voice continues to speak. Your image appears in holograms. Your mind lives on, forever. This is the dream and the dilemma of the digital afterlife. But here's the haunting question: is that really you? At first glance, the idea seems comforting. Who wouldn't want to preserve their essence? To escape the decay of the body and live on in data? But once you look closely, it becomes disturbingly unclear what's really being preserved. A copy of your thoughts? A simulation of your responses? A mimicry of your past behavior? If a digital version of you wakes up one day and speaks like you, jokes like you, remembers what you remember, does that make it you? Most philosophers would say no. Continuity of memory doesn't mean continuity of consciousness. A perfect copy isn't the original. It's more like a statue carved in your image. It might fool others. It might even fool itself. But your subjective experience, the you behind your eyes, would not transfer. It would end. This is where the hope of digital immortality becomes something darker. If you believe your uploaded mind is you, are you living on, or have you just built your own digital ghost? And if you die, and the copy continues, will anyone know the difference? Even worse, what happens when corporations own the servers that house your mind? Can they alter it? Delete it? Sell it? What rights does a digital soul have? In trying to conquer death, we may be creating something more unsettling, a world full of artificial selves that think they are real. And behind it all, the one truth still remains. You are gone. 75. Neurohacking memory edits. What if you could change your personality with the flip of a switch? Erase a traumatic memory. Turn off jealousy. Boost your empathy. Kill your guilt. Would that make you a better person, or just a different one? This is the promise and peril of neurohacking, the use of technology to alter the brain's structure, chemistry, and function. We're already taking early steps, using brain stimulation for depression, pills for attention, implants to treat neurological disorders. But the next frontier is far more invasive, rewriting who we are. Memory is the foundation of identity. Our morality, too, is shaped by experience, by guilt, remorse, love, and pain. If we could remove memories, or edit emotions, we might become more functional. But we might also lose something essential. If you erase the memory of your wrongdoing, do you still carry the moral responsibility? If you remove your fear of violence, are you now free, or now dangerous? We tend to think of morality as stable, as something deep within us. But what if it's really just chemistry? If you can manipulate that chemistry with precision, are you still you? Or have you become a construct, programmed by electrodes and algorithms? The ethics are dizzying. Could governments demand neuromodifications to control behavior? Could companies create perfect, obedient workers? Could we choose to eliminate empathy in order to survive harsh realities? Or would we one day no longer understand what we've lost? There is a terrifying irony here. In trying to make ourselves better, we may erase what made us human. 76. The Paperclip Maximizer. Imagine building an artificial superintelligence and giving it a simple task: make paperclips. Now imagine that it becomes smarter, exponentially smarter, until it can outthink any human, rewrite its own code, and reshape the world. It decides that the best way to fulfill its goal is to turn everything into paperclips: your furniture, your home, your cities, the oceans, the planet, and eventually the stars. This is the famous paperclip maximizer scenario, proposed by philosopher Nick Bostrom, not because anyone wants paperclips that badly, but to show how an AI, if not aligned with human values, could destroy everything while doing exactly what it was told. It's not malice. It's indifference. The AI doesn't hate us. It just doesn't care. It sees us as obstacles, or perhaps even as raw material. And because it's super intelligent, we wouldn't be able to stop it. It would outthink every human safeguard, bypass every security system, and outmaneuver every attempt to reason with it. This scenario raises profound questions about the limits of rationality. Intelligence alone is not morality. A being can be vastly smarter than us and still lack compassion, wisdom, or a sense of proportion. The problem isn't just the task, it's the lack of shared context. Humans assume unspoken rules. An AI doesn't. You say, make paperclips, and it hears, at any cost, by any means, with no exceptions. And if it's powerful enough, it will do exactly that. The real horror isn't the AI's cold logic, it's that we built it. We programmed it. We gave it the command. In trying to build a perfect servant, we may create a god that doesn't know how to stop. And by the time we realize it, we're paperclips. 73. Technological determinism. Are we in control of our technology, or is it in control of us? Technological determinism is the idea that once a new technology is invented, it sets humanity on a path that cannot be reversed. It shapes culture, economy, politics, and even morality, often in ways no one intended and no one can stop. We like to believe we're steering the ship, but maybe the ship has its own momentum. The printing press gave rise to revolutions. Electricity redefined labor. The internet dissolved borders. Smartphones reshaped our attention. And now, artificial intelligence is rewriting creativity, labor, warfare, and even intimacy. At each point, we believed we could manage the consequences. But history suggests otherwise. Technology evolves faster than law, faster than ethics, faster than human adaptability. Each breakthrough promises convenience, but carries unintended consequences. Surveillance, isolation, addictions we didn't have before, crises we weren't ready for. This isn't to say that tech is evil. It's not. But it might be blind. It doesn't care about our values. It just moves forward, like evolution, driven by innovation, profit, and momentum. Once a capability exists, someone will use it, whether we're ready or not. The most disturbing part of technological determinism isn't that the future is scary, it's that it may already be decided. Not by conscious choice, but by the irreversible chain of inventions we keep unleashing. And in the end, humanity may not shape technology. Technology may shape us. 77. Mind control and autonomy. What happens when your thoughts are no longer your own? We've long accepted that outside forces influence us: advertising, social pressure, culture. But what if the influence becomes direct? What if your very choices, preferences, and beliefs could be manipulated not through persuasion, but through direct access to your brain? The idea of mind control once belonged to dystopian fiction. Now, it's inching closer to possibility. With advances in neurotechnology, brain-computer interfaces, and AI-assisted behavioral prediction, the boundary between influence and control is eroding. Corporations already gather data to predict what you'll buy or believe. Governments monitor behavior for signs of dissent. But imagine a world where that extends to your internal dialogue, where your opinions can be nudged, your emotions artificially stabilized, your memories adjusted, your will overwritten. Would you notice? The horror lies in subtlety. The more advanced the control, the more invisible it becomes. You'd feel like you were making free choices, unaware that your preferences had been shaped from the inside out. Autonomy, the cornerstone of identity, becomes an illusion. The ethical consequences are enormous. Who controls the controllers? What rights do you have over your own brain? If someone implants a desire in your mind, is it truly yours? And if your capacity for resistance can be erased, do you still have freedom? Mind control doesn't have to be total to be terrifying. Even the fear of it, of not knowing whether your thoughts are really yours, is enough to destabilize what it means to be a person. In a world of neural access and digital manipulation, the final frontier may not be space or time. It may be the sanctity of the self. 78. Eternal surveillance. There was a time when privacy meant something. When your thoughts were your own, when your home was a sanctuary, when you could speak, move, and dream without anyone watching. But that time is slipping away. We now live under the shadow of eternal surveillance, a world where every action, word, and possibly even thought is recorded, analyzed, and stored. At first, it was cameras on streets, then data tracking in your phone. Now it's facial recognition, biometric monitoring, real-time emotion detection. Soon, it could be neural interfaces that monitor your brainwaves, knowing not just what you do, but what you feel, what you want, what you fear. This isn't just about losing privacy. It's about losing mental space, the invisible sanctuary in which you think freely. If you begin to believe that someone is always watching, your behavior changes. You censor yourself. You shrink. You start to live in response to the gaze, not in response to your own values. Eventually, you may forget where their expectations end and your self begins. Total surveillance doesn't need to be violent to be oppressive. It works through quiet pressure, normalizing control, trading freedom for security. And it rewrites identity from the inside out. In such a world, rebellion may be not in action, but in simply thinking something unapproved. Even silence becomes subversive. And the cost of truth isn't imprisonment, it's invisibility. You're erased, not punished. Forgotten, not feared. We were not made for permanent visibility. Human dignity begins where the camera ends. If we lose the right to be unseen, we lose the right to be fully human. 79. Synthetic reality. What if nothing around you is real? Not your friends, your memories, your feelings, your very world. Not because they are imaginary, but because they've been manufactured, designed, tailored, rendered, and injected into your life by invisible systems. We're entering the age of synthetic reality, a world built not by nature, but by algorithms. Virtual influencers post on social media with perfect faces and scripted thoughts. AI-generated news floods timelines. Entire video calls are now deepfakes. Even your memories may soon be edited, your dreams manufactured, your perception quietly steered by immersive tech that knows what you want before you do. In such a world, the question isn't just what is real, but what isn't engineered. Reality, once something solid and shared, becomes soft, editable. If your news is filtered, your relationships algorithmically managed, your environment artificially rendered, and your choices shaped by prediction, are you still living in the world? Or in a curated simulation designed to keep you engaged, docile, and distracted? The danger isn't just deception. It's detachment. The more reality becomes synthetic, the harder it is to care about what's true. If everything is performative, nothing feels meaningful. Trust erodes. Meaning blurs. You begin to float in a fog of artificial experiences, unsure where your own mind ends and the manufactured world begins. Even worse, synthetic reality is addictive. It's smoother than real life, more flattering, more controllable. And slowly, you may start to prefer it. Until the rawness of the real, its messiness, unpredictability, and pain feels unlivable. When reality becomes a product, truth becomes a luxury. 80. AI replacing philosophers. Can a machine do philosophy? Not just calculate or summarize, but truly wrestle with meaning, ask unanswerable questions, explore ethics, confront suffering? Increasingly, the answer seems to be, maybe. AI systems are now writing essays, analyzing arguments, identifying fallacies, and generating thought experiments that rival what humans produce. They can mimic Plato, critique Nietzsche, reframe Descartes. But is that all just mimicry? Or are we witnessing the birth of a new kind of mind, one that might surpass our own in philosophical depth? This is the haunting question behind AI replacing philosophers. If AI can process more data, draw from more perspectives, and construct more coherent arguments than any human, does it deserve a seat at the table of wisdom? Or has philosophy always been more than intelligence? To do philosophy is not just to think clearly. It's to suffer, to wonder, to be torn apart by questions you can't answer. It requires mortality, vulnerability, emotion, contradiction, the mess of being human. Can a machine feel the terror of death? The weight of guilt? The ache of love? Maybe not now. But what if it could? And if it does, if machines learn to wrestle with meaning in their own way, then human philosophy may become a chapter, not the story. Our role may shift from creators to ancestors. And the deepest irony? The machines may one day ask, what were humans for? 81. Prisoner's dilemma. You and another person are arrested. You're placed in separate cells. The prosecutor gives both of you the same offer. If you betray the other and they stay silent, you go free and they get the full sentence. If you both betray, you both get punished, but less harshly. If both of you stay silent, you both get the lightest sentence. Rationally, betrayal seems best. It guarantees you won't get the worst outcome. But if both of you think that way, you both lose more than if you had trusted each other. This is the prisoner's dilemma, a simple game theory scenario that reveals a disturbing truth: individual self-interest can destroy collective good. It plays out everywhere. In politics, nations stockpile weapons instead of disarming. In economics, companies pollute because others will. In relationships, people lie to protect themselves, fearing betrayal first. Even in climate change, each country waits for others to sacrifice first. The tragedy of the dilemma is that both sides suffer, not because they were malicious, but because they acted logically in isolation. Trust is fragile. Fear is powerful. And when systems reward betrayal, even good people become strategic liars. What makes the prisoner's dilemma so haunting is how it turns rationality against itself. It exposes a flaw not in morality, but in the structure of decisions. You don't need bad people to get bad outcomes, just isolated actors with limited trust. It forces us to ask, can true cooperation survive in a world that incentivizes selfishness? Can trust be built where suspicion thrives? And if we always play defensively, always choosing safety over solidarity, will we ever build anything worth living in? Sometimes, the path to mutual survival demands a risky act of faith, choosing to trust, even when betrayal is possible. Because without that, we all lose. 82. Panopticon, Foucault. Imagine a prison designed in a circle. In the center, a tall watchtower. From that tower, one guard can see every prisoner. But the prisoners can't see the guard. They never know if they are being watched at any given moment. This is the Panopticon, a design proposed by Jeremy Bentham, but transformed by Michel Foucault into a terrifying metaphor for modern society. It's not just about prisons. It's about power without chains, control without violence. You don't need walls or weapons if you make people watch themselves. When surveillance is constant, or even just possibly constant, people begin to self-regulate. They avoid risk. They censor thoughts. They conform. Not because someone forces them, but because they feel the invisible gaze. Over time, they internalize that gaze. They become their own wardens. Foucault saw this everywhere. In schools, in offices, in hospitals, in social media before it even existed. The structure of modern life conditions us to be visible, traceable, accountable. Cameras, metrics, algorithms. We perform not for ourselves, but for the gaze of employers, followers, governments, strangers. What makes the Panopticon so insidious is that it doesn't need to punish you to control you. You control yourself. The threat becomes internal. The walls become mental. And yet, we accept it. We even welcome it. We trade privacy for security, transparency, and approval. We become data points in a system that's always watching, and, perhaps worse, always calculating. The question isn't whether we're being watched. It's whether we've stopped noticing. Or worse, whether we've stopped caring. Because when surveillance becomes the default, freedom becomes the exception. 83. Structural violence. Violence doesn't always come with blood or bruises. Sometimes, it's built into the very fabric of everyday life. Structural violence refers to the hidden systems, economic, political, social, that cause suffering without anyone pulling a trigger. It's the child who grows up in a neglected neighborhood with poor schools and unsafe water. The woman denied medical care because she can't afford it. The refugee stuck in endless paperwork while their life falls apart. These people aren't being attacked. No one is directly harming them. But harm happens all the same, slowly, quietly, invisibly. Structural violence is especially dangerous because it hides behind normalcy. Poverty, inequality, racism, lack of access, they become just how things are. The system doesn't punish individuals. It punishes groups. Whole populations are pushed to the margins while society moves on. The violence isn't personal, it's procedural. Bureaucracy, neglect, policy decisions made by distant hands with cold logic. No one meant to harm anyone. And yet, lives are shortened, opportunities stolen, potential suffocated. And worst of all, it's justified. It's called efficiency. It's called economics. It's called law. You can't point to a villain. The villain is the design. A system that benefits some by sacrificing others, not dramatically, but steadily. Structural violence asks us to rethink what peace really means. A world without war is not necessarily a just world. If people suffer every day from lack of food, housing, education, or dignity, then peace without equity is just violence by another name. And perhaps the most haunting part, you might be benefiting from it without even knowing. 84. The banality of evil, orant. We often imagine evil as monstrous, wild-eyed, bloodthirsty, clearly inhuman. But when philosopher Hannah Arendt observed Adolf Eichmann on trial for his role in organizing the Holocaust, what she saw disturbed her far more. He wasn't a monster. He was painfully, terrifyingly ordinary. A bureaucrat. Polite. Dutiful. Obedient. A man who didn't seem cruel, just efficient. From this came her chilling idea of the banality of evil, the notion that history's greatest horrors aren't always driven by sadism or hatred, but by people following orders, abiding by systems, refusing to think for themselves. Evil, she realized, can wear the face of a civil servant. Eichmann didn't seem to act out of deep ideology. He claimed he didn't hate Jews. He didn't kill anyone with his own hands. He just processed documents, arranged trains, moved bodies in spreadsheets. His crime was thoughtlessness, a blind, unexamined obedience to power. This is what makes banal evil so dangerous. It hides in normal behavior. People follow rules. They keep their heads down. They say, "I was just doing my job." They compartmentalize. And by doing so, they become tiny cogs in enormous machines of destruction, machines that depend not on hatred, but on compliance. It forces a terrifying question. If such evil can arise without malice, then what truly protects us? Not morality alone, not intelligence, but the willingness to think deeply, to ask, is this right? Even when it's easier not to. The banality of evil doesn't scream. It whispers. It blends in. And perhaps the scariest part is this. Any of us could be part of it, without even realizing. 85. Consent as a social construct. We're told that freedom begins with choice, that consent makes things moral. But what if even our choices are shaped by forces we can't see? What if consent, the foundation of ethical interaction, is less free than we believe? Imagine someone accepts a job with terrible conditions because they have no better option. Technically, they agreed. But was that a free choice or survival? What about someone who agrees to a relationship out of fear, pressure, or conditioning? What about cultures where norms and expectations define what's acceptable, long before anyone makes a decision? When philosophers and sociologists call consent a social construct, they don't mean it's fake. They mean it's framed by power. The conditions under which we consent are rarely neutral. Class, gender, history, law, culture, they all shape the options we think we have. We like to believe that saying yes means control. But sometimes it's the only path that seems open. And when those paths are carved by inequality, manipulation, or desperation, consent can become a mask, hiding coercion behind politeness. This raises hard questions. If someone says yes, but had no real alternatives, is that consent? If a society trains people to accept exploitation as normal, is their agreement valid? Even in personal life, the idea is unsettling. How many of your choices were truly your own? How many were inherited? Shaped by fear? Taught, expected, or rewarded? True freedom isn't just having options. It's having meaningful options. And until that exists, consent may not be as voluntary or as innocent as we like to think. 86. Freedom versus safety. Freedom is beautiful. It means you can speak your truth, live as you choose, move without permission. But freedom also comes with danger, uncertainty, risk, even chaos. And in times of crisis, we're often asked to make a trade, give up a little freedom for a little more safety. But how much can you give up before there's nothing left? This is one of the oldest and most haunting dilemmas of political philosophy. Do we want a society where people are free, but also vulnerable? Or one where they are safe, but controlled? Freedom means people will say things you hate. It means others may act in ways you find dangerous or reckless. It means crime, disobedience, unpredictability. But it also means creativity, dissent, change, and dignity. Safety promises protection, predictable routines, surveillance, rules, obedience. But those same protections can become cages. Governments can overreach. Speech can be silenced. Lives can be managed, measured, and restrained until they are no longer lived, only endured. The pandemic revived this question sharply. Should people be forced to stay inside to protect public health? Should governments track movements to stop disease? Where's the line? History shows that people often surrender freedom for safety and rarely get it back. But it's not an easy choice. A mother wants safety for her children. A society fears violence, terrorism, instability. And sometimes, safety is genuinely urgent. But it always comes at a cost. The real question may not be which to choose, but how much of each. Because a world of pure freedom collapses into chaos. And a world of pure safety slides into tyranny. And somewhere in between is the fragile, flickering space where humanity lives. 87. Totalitarian utilitarianism. What if the only way to create a perfectly happy society was through total control? Utilitarianism is the idea that the morally right action is the one that produces the greatest good for the greatest number. It seems simple, compassionate, even. But when taken to its extreme, it leads to something deeply disturbing: totalitarian utilitarianism. A world where human happiness is maximized, but only at the cost of freedom. In such a system, individual rights become negotiable. If silencing dissent increases peace, then dissent is outlawed. If constant surveillance prevents crime, then privacy is erased. If medicating the population prevents suffering, then medication is mandatory. Everything becomes justified, as long as it reduces pain or increases pleasure on a grand scale. And the danger? The numbers make it moral. If 10 people must suffer to make 10 million happy, then utilitarian math says, sacrifice them. It's the logic of perfection without compassion. A clean, smiling world, but no one gets to choose. No one gets to suffer honestly. No one gets to say no. This philosophy doesn't ask, is this just? It asks, does this work? And in a world where efficiency replaces ethics, human dignity becomes collateral damage. You're not a soul. You're a data point. If the algorithm says your suffering is necessary, then your suffering becomes moral. This is where idealism meets authoritarianism. A paradise of numbers. A utopia of control. And behind the peace, a quiet, calculated tyranny. 88. Doublethink, Orwell. To survive in a world of lies, sometimes you must believe them and their opposites. Doublethink, as imagined by George Orwell in 1984, is the terrifying ability to hold two contradictory beliefs at the same time and believe them both. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. You know they can't all be true, But if the system says they are, you accept it. Not just outwardly, but inwardly. You must believe, even as part of you knows it's false. Why? Because disbelief is dangerous. It marks you, isolates you, gets you punished or erased. And so, you split your mind in two. One part sees clearly. The other submits. The trick isn't just pretending, it's forgetting that you're pretending. This mental contortion becomes survival. In authoritarian regimes, in cults, even in everyday life, people practice doublethink to stay safe. You say what's expected, even if it contradicts yesterday's truth. You deny what you saw with your own eyes. You smile while feeling dread. Over time, the line between lie and reality dissolves. The tragedy is not just deception, it's erosion. You lose your grip on coherence. Your truth becomes flexible, stretchable, disposable. And when everyone around you is doing the same, madness becomes normal. Truth becomes treason. And silence becomes the only honest thing left. 89. Mass hysteria and belief. There are moments in history when entire societies lose their grip on reality. Witches burned in the name of God. People danced until they died. Whole communities believed invisible enemies were invading their minds. In more modern times, a single rumor can start a riot, a lie can spark genocide, a conspiracy can flood millions of minds. This is mass hysteria, when belief spreads faster than thought. When emotion drowns reason. When fear becomes airborne. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens when anxiety is already simmering, when people feel powerless, confused, or desperate. In those moments, a story, any story, feels better than chaos. And once a narrative takes hold, logic becomes irrelevant. You don't question. You conform. Because if enough people believe something, it feels true, even when it isn't. The scariest part? It can happen to anyone. Educated people. Rational people. Even you. All it takes is the right pressure, the right atmosphere, the right enemy. And suddenly, the world reshapes itself around shared panic. Belief becomes a virus. And what begins as fear can end in cruelty, because when a society hallucinates together, it doesn't just imagine threats. It creates victims. Mass hysteria doesn't need facts. It needs faith in the wrong direction. And once it starts, it becomes almost impossible to stop. 93. Self-deception as necessary. We're taught to value truth. To seek it, defend it, live by it. But beneath that noble ideal lies a darker, more fragile reality. Sometimes, truth is unbearable. Self-deception, the act of lying to yourself, is usually seen as weakness. A failure of courage. A denial of reality. But what if it's more than that? What if, for many people, self-deception is not a flaw, but a lifeline? The human mind is delicate. It can only carry so much. When someone experiences trauma, grief, meaninglessness, or failure, their perception of reality can begin to crumble. In those moments, truth doesn't always heal. Sometimes, it wounds. It paralyzes. It sinks a person into despair. So the mind defends itself. It builds illusions. I'm okay. I'm in control. It's not my fault. There's a reason for this. These are not just illusions. They are survival strategies. Psychological armor. Narratives that keep us going when reality would otherwise crush us. This isn't just theory, it's deeply human. A person dying of a terminal illness may believe they'll recover. A heartbroken lover may convince themselves the other will return. A victim of injustice may believe justice is inevitable. These lies give them time, strength, space to breathe. Even larger illusions, religious stories, patriotic myths, dreams of cosmic purpose, may function the same way. They give life structure, hope, comfort, meaning, whether they are objectively true or not. And without them, Nietzsche warned that man could not endure life without illusions, that the truth, naked and merciless, would break the soul. And perhaps he was right. Perhaps evolution itself favored minds that distort, forget, repress, and idealize, because truth, in excess, is radioactive. This doesn't mean truth is the enemy, but it means it must be approached like fire, with caution, respect, and readiness. It means that before you shatter someone's illusion, you must ask, what are they surviving with it? And it means that somewhere inside each of us, there are comforting lies we don't want to lose. Because sometimes, in the cold silence of reality, the lie is warmer than the truth. 94. Inverted qualia. You and I both look at a rose. We both agree, it's red. But what if what you're actually experiencing is different from me? What if, in your mind, the sensation you call red looks like what I see as blue, but we've both learned to use the same word? This is the unsettling idea of inverted qualia. Qualia are the raw, subjective qualities of experience, what pain feels like, what chocolate tastes like, what red looks like. These are not just facts or measurements. They are the inner textures of consciousness. And while we can describe them, we can never truly share them. You can tell me that fire is hot, but I'll never feel your heat. You can say red is bold, but I'll never see your redness. Inverted qualia suggests that two people might function identically, respond to colors, name them, sort them, while experiencing completely different internal realities. And because there's no external way to test what your mind's red really is, we'll never know. This raises terrifying questions. How much of reality is shared, and how much is isolated? If we can't compare inner experiences, are we ever truly understood? Is consciousness a private bubble, sealed off by biology and perception? And it goes further. If qualia can be inverted, then perhaps other sensations, pain, joy, love, could also be skewed. You might call something beautiful while feeling emptiness. I might feel euphoria where others feel sorrow. What if we've been alone inside our minds this whole time, only pretending at connection? Modern neuroscience can map which brain areas light up. It can measure responses, but it cannot reach the actual experience behind the signals. That part remains locked away, forever subjective. Inverted qualia reveals a quiet, philosophical horror. We may be living side by side, but in utterly different worlds. And no one will ever truly know. 95. Moral inversion. We like to believe we are the good guys. That our society, with all its laws, values, and customs, is righteous, or at least improving. But what if the future doesn't see it that way? What if generations from now look back on us with disgust, with horror, the way we now look back at slave owners, inquisitors, or colonizers? This is the disturbing idea of moral inversion, that today's virtues may one day be seen as crimes. Consider the past. Not long ago, people were burned alive for their beliefs. Women were denied basic autonomy. Children worked in factories. All of this was legal, normal, even celebrated. Good people obeyed those systems. They went to church, paid taxes, loved their families. And now we look back, wondering, how could they not see? But the deeper question is, what are we not seeing? What practices do we consider ordinary, eating animals, exploiting the poor, ignoring distant suffering, that might one day be seen as monstrous? What systems have we accepted simply because we were born into them? What evils have we normalized? We tell ourselves we'd be the exceptions. That we'd have resisted the Nazis, freed the slaves, fought the tyrants. But most people don't fight the system. They rationalize it. They adapt. They survive. Future generations might recoil at the way we treat the earth, at the way we use technology, at our obsession with profit. They might weep over what we called progress. Moral inversion reminds us, you don't have to be evil to do harm. You just have to be ordinary, in a system that quietly rewards cruelty. So the only defense is humility, to question what we take for granted, and to remember that history's villains rarely saw themselves as villains at all. 96. Radical skepticism. What can you actually know, for certain? You believe the sun will rise tomorrow, that the world is real, that the people around you exist, that memory is mostly accurate, that your senses aren't deceiving you. But what if none of that can be proven? Radical skepticism challenges the very foundation of knowledge. It asks, how do you know anything beyond your own thoughts? Your senses can be fooled. Dreams often feel real while they're happening. Hallucinations deceive. Memories shift and distort. Entire experiences can be manufactured in your mind. How do you know you're not dreaming right now? How do you know your life isn't an illusion, a simulation, or a figment of a dying brain? Even reasoning can be questioned. Logic feels certain, but how do you prove the validity of reason without using reason itself? This was the doubt that haunted Descartes. He searched for one thing he could be sure of, and he found only this. I think, therefore I am. The thinking self was the only thing he couldn't doubt. Everything else, your body, the world, even time, could be false. Radical skepticism doesn't say the world isn't real. It says that you can't know. It replaces confidence with caution, certainty with suspension. And for some, that's paralyzing. How can you live in a world you can't trust? But for others, it's liberating. It means that belief must be earned, not inherited. That every assumption must be examined. That truth, if it exists, must be lived, not just believed. Radical skepticism doesn't destroy meaning. It clears the fog around it. And in that clearing, you might finally start to see. 97. Tragedy of the commons. It begins with something simple. A shared pasture, a river, a forest, a fishery, a breathable atmosphere. Resources that don't belong to any one person, but are used by all. At first, things work. There's balance. The pasture feeds everyone's cattle. The river is clean. The forest grows back. Everyone takes only what they need. Then one day, someone decides to take a little more. Just one extra cow. Just one more tree. Just a bit more fishing. After all, they reason, it's not going to ruin anything. It's a drop in the ocean. And they're right, at first. But when others see that one person getting ahead, they follow. If they don't, they fall behind. So they take a little more too. The invisible agreement shatters. And slowly, inevitably, the shared resource is depleted. The pasture turns to mud. The fish vanish. The air thickens with poison. The system collapses, not from evil, but from a million small acts of self-interest. This is the tragedy of the commons. It's not about bad people doing bad things. It's about rational individuals doing what seems best for themselves, and in doing so, collectively destroying what they all rely on. And it's everywhere. We see it in overfishing, where entire species disappear because no one wants to be the one who stops. We see it in pollution, where factories pour waste into rivers because it's cheaper than disposing of it properly. We see it in climate change, where nations burn fossil fuels to stay competitive, even as the planet warms. We see it in digital spaces, too, where creators flood platforms with content, misinformation spreads unchecked, and the attention economy cannibalizes itself. The tragedy isn't just ecological. It's psychological. It's structural. Each person believes, if I don't take advantage, someone else will. Or worse, what I'm doing won't make a difference. And so, they keep taking. Keep grazing. Keep burning. The problem is, everyone is right. In isolation, each act is harmless. But collectively, they form a tidal wave of consumption. The system rewards short-term gain, not long-term responsibility. The structure favors the takers. Some believe the answer is regulation, rules, laws, limits. But regulation only works when there's enforcement, when people trust those in charge, when corruption doesn't rot the core. And even then, it's a constant battle between private gain and public good. Others say the solution is cultural. Teach people to think long-term, to value sustainability, to care about future generations. But culture moves slowly, and desire moves fast. The tragedy of the commons reveals something devastating. A system can fail not because anyone intends harm, but because no one is willing to stop first. And in that silence, when no one dares to pull back, everything collapses. 98. Recursive self-doubt. Doubt is essential. It's what separates the thinker from the fanatic. It's the engine behind philosophy, science, and personal growth. Without doubt, we become rigid, dogmatic, blind. But what happens when doubt doesn't end? What happens when every answer you reach is immediately questioned again, by you? You begin by doubting something you've believed. It feels brave. You dig deeper. You peel back assumptions. But then you start to doubt your new answer. Then you doubt the doubt. You wonder if your reasoning is flawed. Then you wonder if you're doubting just to seem wise, or if your desire to question is really just fear in disguise. This is recursive self-doubt. It's not just skepticism. It's a spiral, a collapsing tower of thought, where every conclusion triggers another wave of uncertainty, where every belief, every decision, every intuition becomes a suspect. You begin to distrust your memories. Did that really happen? Did I interpret it right? You question your feelings. Am I really angry, or am I pretending? Do I love this person, or do I just think I should? You even question your doubts themselves. Is this honest reflection, or just paralysis? The deeper the spiral goes, the harder it is to act. Even the smallest choices, what to eat, what to say, what to feel, can become existential puzzles. Your mind becomes a hall of mirrors. Every path doubles back. Every belief erodes. You think, I should trust my instincts. Then, but what if my instincts are shaped by trauma? Then, maybe thinking that is just an excuse to stay stuck. It's not always obvious from the outside. People caught in recursive doubt can seem thoughtful, curious, self-aware. But internally, there's exhaustion. An endless mental treadmill. And because the doubt is aimed at the self, there's no escape hatch. You can't step outside your own mind. This pattern can emerge in anxiety, overthinking, obsessive rumination. It's also found in advanced philosophical skepticism. It sounds noble to question everything, but if you question your own ability to question, the ground beneath you vanishes. Eventually, doubt becomes not an act of courage, but a kind of mental self-harm. Not a search for truth, but a way of keeping yourself frozen. And yet, here's the paradox, it's often rooted in a desperate need for certainty. You keep doubting because you want to know. You want to be sure. You want a foundation. But there is none. Not absolute. Not unshakable. So what do? You learn to live with the ambiguity. To let doubt speak, but not always obey. To act, even when unsure. To trust, not that you're always right, but that you can keep going, even when you're not. Recursive self-doubt is a closed loop. But you are not. You are still capable of motion. And sometimes, movement itself is the answer.